Hello, listeners past, present, and future. This is Haddonfield Radio's fourth live stream, live
from the basement.
Yes. Very exciting. A very exciting title, I thought. I came up with
Who doesn't want to hang out in a creepy old dark,
We are
dingy
literally
basement?
in the corner of a freezing effing cold basement. If you could see what I'm seeing, you'd be spooked. Because anything could be lurking in any of these shadows.
I only have lights literally right here, and everything around us is pretty dim, and there's a lot of, quite frankly, robots and weird things we've built for...
There's a lot of things lurking in the shadows.
Yeah.
I think we should start by asking, can you hear us? Are we being heard? That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think after our little snafu last time, I think it would be nice if we could just get some confirmation that the audio is working this time.
Because we do know American Sign Language.
I think we have it all sorted out. I hope, because if not, well, then, hey, loud and clear. All right.
So let's say hello to a few people who have joined us already. Midwest Villain Z, we love you. Mike Hatfield.
Oh,
Anthony
buddy.
Soto from Scotland. I love that.
I know.
We got Johnny P. Good evening. Of course, Spooky Halloween Gal.
Spooky Halloween Gal.
Always so nice to see you. Nick Alfieri. There he is.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very excited that you're here joining us. Johnny P. Swaggy G.
Swaggy G, thank you for the note. We got
Where
it in
is
the mail.
Get that
It's right
note.
here, yeah.
Let's he's
It was
Swaggy
our
G.
second piece of fan mail. Spooky Halloween Gal gets that credit, but this was a nice little thank you note he wrote.
He sent us a beautiful little thank you letter.
He was
a nice, supportive, kind letter.
He was one of our winners from the last live stream we did when we were giving away swag packs, and we're going to give away some more later on. And it's the same stuff. So if you entered last time, I'm sorry, but there's nothing new. But hopefully we have some new people who want some stuff.
I guess we should start by saying my name is, as always, Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francazio.
And tonight we have a packed 2 hours. We've got a bunch of well, let's hope it's packed. I mean, you never know what's going to happen with one of these things. But we've got a bunch of different topics we're going to talk about tonight. I've been talking about it on the Instagram page. Joe, what were you just going to say?
I was going to say, well, we have a lot to talk about, and it's just been a busy day for Haddonfield Radio. We actually conducted our first interview for our Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park series.
Right.
Our next episode is going to cover Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection, and we were fortunate enough to talk to Keith Voss, who worked on both trailers, and you couldn't ask for anything more when you're doing a show about trailers and you're going to cover those two movies. So we talked to somebody who actually worked on it, and we're going to have them in our next episode, our very first interview, and we're happy to bring it to you guys. And so this is round 2 for us today.
If you guys love the Halloween franchise, as I'm sure all of you do, and movie trailers, you're going to love this interview. He was really, really, really cool and a really nice guy. He's also a podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
He has a podcast called The Indie Cast that talks all about the Indiana Jones franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a super knowledgeable, but humble, nice guy. And he happened to work not only on the trailers for Halloween Resurrection and H2O, but the Matrix trailers, the infamous Sam Raimi Spider-Man World Trade Center trailer that's always been talked about, and the Mad Max franchise.
He had an uncle too that was very big in the trailer world, who got to work on a lot of famous trailers. So this guy had a lot of stories,
a lot of good insights,
and you just couldn't ask for anything more with what we're doing. So that was a great interview to do to start things off.
Well, yeah. So where are we going to start? You know what I'd like to start with tonight? I'd like to start talking about a couple of movies that have released trailers in the horror genre, and a couple of trailers from this week. Now, for our listeners in the past or the future, we are recording this on February 5th, 2024, and today is actually the final day of my 48th year on this planet. I'm going to be turning 49 tomorrow. Now, I hate birthdays. No, don't say that. I don't like birthdays as I'm getting older.
Okay, good, because I forgot it.
There's going to be a very exciting reveal during this episode. I'm going to show you what my 49-year-old forehead looks like now that my hairline's receding. I was looking at I was looking at myself on camera while we're recording the interview today, and I realized this is why I'm good for radio and for podcasting.
This
You
is
don't
what
have
a
to see
couple of
this.
48-year-olds do.
But I'll show it to you. I said people could take ad space up
how much
here. We
hair
could
is
make
your
a little
thing?
money.
No. But I want to talk about really quick before we get into some of the movies that we advertised that we were going to review. You showed me a trailer
Yeah,
when you got here.
a couple trailers.
For the vampire ballerina
okay,
movie,
let's
which
start
is just
with that one.
it was kind of amazing. Was it? What was the name of it again? Annabelle.
The trailer
or-
came out maybe 2 weeks ago. It's
No,
called
Abigail.
Abigail.
Abigail. Sorry.
I don't know if any of you guys have heard about this movie. The directors are Radio Silence, who directed the last 2 Scream films, as well as the film Ready or Not. So I was very curious about this, but the real reason I was curious about it, I'll reveal in a second. But first off, what did you think of that trailer?
I thought it looked it, it it looked interesting enough that I would want to watch it. It looked like a unique spin on the vampire thing, but it looked like I'm not looking for a highly elevated
Well, it's sort of one of those,
cinematic
like,
experience.
yeah,
You can kind of feel out
Right.
the type of movie that it's pulling from and where it's going. Where you lock people in a certain room, they have a certain amount of time to
Well, for those of you who
blah, blah,
haven't
blah.
seen it,
But you got to check it out.
the basic idea of the trailer is almost like in Reservoir Dogs, a disparate group of criminals are brought together. They're all told to maintain their anonymity, but they all, I'm sure, have a particular set of skills.
Right,
each one of
everyone's
them.
going to be
and
yeah,
their
different.
job is to kidnap this young girl that another guy played by Giancarlo Esposito is going to hold for ransom to get $50 million from her rich father.
Mhm.
So they kidnap her. That's in the trailer. And it turns out that she's a vampire of some kind, a little girl ballerina vampire.
Mhm.
Now, this film could very well be a POS.
It could be
upon delivery.
I
But-
did think during it they might have shown the best parts. It could be one of those movies where they're kind of giving you the best stuff in the trailer. But
Well, here's the reason why it stood out to me, and why I've, in a kind of a tangential way, I've sort of followed the production and the development of this film.
yeah,
Now, do you remember back a number of years ago? This film, Abigail, is being released by Universal Pictures.
Mhm.
A number of years ago, in the near past, Universal Pictures tried to launch something called the Dark Universe, an interconnected Marvel Studios style horror universe that incorporates all the classic Universal monsters: Dracula, Frankenstein, the Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man, and the Wolfman. And they even cast a number of very big stars. Tom Cruise was the first one. He was the Mummy. He
Okay.
played the Mummy. And Russell Crowe was in that film as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Then Javier Bardem was going to play Frankenstein. Johnny Depp was going to be the Invisible Man. Angelina Jolie was going to be the Bride of Frankenstein. And so it was going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
But the Mummy movie, directed by Alex Kurtzman, who show runs a lot of the more
Yep.
recent Star Trek shows.
Yep.
When the film came out, first of all, the trailer was notorious because when it was first released, they didn't have the right sound mix, so it was all goofy.
Yeah.
But then the movie comes out, and now the ostensible public recollection of it was that it tanked, but that's not necessarily true. It actually made a decent amount of money, but it just was panned,
Yeah.
and so that destroyed the whole dark universe concept they were going for, because that film didn't,
Yeah, it's amazing how quick they jump ship, right?
But there was another movie a little bit before that came out.
Okay.
And it was a Luke Evans movie called Dracula Untold, also by Universal Pictures,
Okay.
which was a movie where the entire idea is to take the classic Dracula, Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, and move him to the modern day to be Dracula in the modern day. And that's what that movie does, okay? I think they would have probably incorporated Luke Evans as Dracula in the Dark Universe. Now, jumping forward to this movie, Abigail. If you remember, Lee Wannell, right before the COVID lockdown, released his version of The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss. Have you guys seen that one?
I did, yes.
And it was really good. And for a movie that was, I think, literally the last film released wide in cinemas before the COVID lockdowns, it did well. And then as soon as the COVID lockdowns hit, they took that movie Lee Wannell's The Invisible Man, and they made it one of those movies streaming at
Yeah, I
home,
think that's how I saw
and
it.
you
Yeah.
could pay $20 and
Yeah.
watch the movie. And that's how I saw it.
Yeah. I definitely saw it at home.
Now, Lee Wannell is about to go into production on Universal Pictures' new update of The Wolfman.
Okay.
Now, this movie was developed for Ryan Gosling, but after
Like
this
this exact script, or
yes,
okay.
he was going to be the new Wolfman.
Yeah.
But after the mega success of Barbie, he backs out.
Uh-huh.
They replace him with an actor that I think is even better for the role. He's not as big a star, but the actor is Christopher Abbott from Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor, and he used to be on the HBO series Girls. He's a really like moody actor, really good actor. And so here you have The Invisible Man by Lee Wannell,
Okay.
The Wolf Man by Lee Wannell, and now this Abigail movie comes out. Now, when this movie was in development at the beginning, the title of the movie was different. It was called Dracula's Daughter. I
that's
think
a little more
clearly the rich man that they want the $50 million
I
from
see,
is
I
going to
see.
end up being Dracula.
I see. Yeah. And when we keep saying ballerina, it's not like in a little kid way. Like she's a trained, professional, very good, but young ballerina. So it's making for some striking visuals of the way this girl is.
Yeah, you got to see this trailer.
Attacking
It's
or
really
bouncing
an
around the screen.
interesting concept.
Yeah.
But what the trailer doesn't show you is the idea of Dracula at all. No,
No.
mention of Dracula, nothing.
Well, I mean, you just get the idea that there's a vampire, but it's the girl.
If it was me making this movie, I would assume that in the third act, you're going to find out who this girl's father is, and it'll be Dracula.
I thought that the father was just a ruse to get these people in this place, and that it ended. It was just some sort of sick game to trap because the girl likes to like hunt.
Well, if you see the trailer, I have another
people or,
sub theory.
Okay.
What if Giancarlo Esposito is Dracula? He's hired these people to get the little girl away from the mother.
Yeah.
Maybe he's the new Universal Studios Dracula. Now, do I think that's going to be the truth? No, because I don't. As great of an actor as he is, he's not a big enough. I don't think. I think they would have. I don't feel
if
like
they're going to
he
give
would
you that
be
big
cast.
reveal, they probably
No.
shouldn't put it in the trailer at all.
But I do think there will be a reveal of Dracula in this movie. Now, what I'm trying to get in my ultimate point is, it almost seems like Universal Pictures is sort of quietly actually building their dark universe. A new version of it.
Yeah.
With Lee Wannell guiding these other two films, The Invisible Man and The Wolf Man, and now this film that I think is almost like what they used to call a backdoor pilot
Yeah.
for Dracula.
See how people feel about whatever version we're going to see at the end. Yeah, of whatever version of Dracula. Yeah.
Either way, it makes me interested, and I'm certainly interested. I loved Lee Wannell's The Invisible Man. I loved that suit that he designed for The Invisible Man. That makes you invisible.
Yeah,
It's just a great piece of design in that movie.
I only saw it the once when it first came out. I should go.
Lee
rewatch
Wannell's great. Got his start, of course. He co-wrote the original Saw movie with James Wan. He kind of cut his teeth with James Wan, but he made a really good film called Upgrade, which is about this man who him and his wife are attacked. He's paralyzed, but it's in the near future, and they're able to put this special chip in his head that's an AI that controls his body so he can move again, but the AI is in control.
Yeah.
And the AI decides to take him on a revenge mission against the people who killed his wife and paralyzed him.
Sure.
And the AI can download how to do kung fu and everything else. It's a great movie.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
guys seen Upgrade? Because it's one of my favorite movies of whatever year it came out, one of those recent last 5 years. So I have a lot of interest in what Lee Wannell's going to do with the Wolfman and what Abigail really is. So if you haven't seen that trailer, do yourself a favor and go take a look at it and let us know what you think of it.
It definitely looked interesting, if nothing else.
I don't know if it would get me to the theater.
Oh no, yeah, it would take a lot. I have to admit. So I'm a huge movie guy, right? Obviously, but I kind of hate going to the theaters now, and I honestly don't know if it's just if the theater culture has changed in the way I seem to be perceiving it, or if I'm just getting older. But like, I cannot go and not be bothered by people around me in a theater ever. And I try to avoid it. I try to go to early shows, late shows. You try to go to small towns, all these things. And there's
I
always
go to the first show of the day, the
somebody.
earliest matinee on a weekday.
But then
You're always
inevitably
alone.
there'll be maybe two other people come in, and they will sit right next to me, and they will still bring out the phones and yabber,
Oh,
and it's just
it's
and I'm
not a good
too.
experience.
I get distracted. I can't put that aside if somebody's doing that.
The
and it's
days
just,
where there's like a little old man that's up in the projection booth who's been up there for 50 years and he's got the cigar and he's
yeah.
cranking it. That though it's all corporate now. Like half the time, like they're basically just playing a DVD on a
Yeah.
big screen. So it's
Some of it's
But-
me
but-
too. I take my movie watching too seriously. Like my wife tells me all the time, going to film school ruined watching movies for me. I can't. It's hard for me just to sit back and watch. It's, I don't want to miss a detail. I don't want to miss any trailers or teasers. I want to be able to make sure I can see and take everything in
Right.
and enjoy it. So I don't know.
Midwest Villain Z commented. He says, "Went and saw Godzilla -1 on your recommendation, and oh my God, you were right. Maybe the best Godzilla ever. Saw the black and white version too for that extra touch of awesomeness. I'm envious of that. I saw it in IMAX, and I'm going to tell you a counter to what we were just saying about the movie theater experience. I saw that in IMAX on a weekday matinee. I was literally the only person in the theater." And it was one of the best experiences I've had in a movie theater in a number of years.
I didn't realize. So you can go see it in black and white in the theaters?
They've now released a new version of it that is in black and white.
Huh.
I saw the original release in
Yeah.
color, IMAX. It was literally majestic. That's the word I would use.
I am actually red-green colorblind. You know that, right? So
Right.
I've always dug the black and white versions, because things I'm seeing things appropriately. Then you know what I mean. It's not twisted to me because of my weird colorblindness.
I want to
But
say
anyway.
hello to nephew FXX. It is so good to see you, my friend. I can't believe your name's Matthew. I thought your name was just nephew FXX. Nephew FXX on Instagram, YouTube. He's a mask rehauler, does Michael
Ah.
Myers masks. He's super talented. I've been keeping up and following him for a while now. We kind of been, friends through the social medias.
Matthew, you have any experience with the Trick or Treat Studios mask? Because I got a bunch that need to be rehauled. But
Oh,
anyway,
he's
we'll
one of the
talk
best
later.
out there right now. But he said that he had our voice to faces opposite in his
One of
mind.
another one of those people.
That
huh?
happens a lot.
That's
I'm
odd,
surprised
yeah.
you people think I would have Joe's voice. Like I don't know if
Well,
I
don't be
if
insulted.
I feel
by
hurt by
it.
that. I sort of feel hurt by that.
Wow.
I don't know why,
Huh.
but yeah.
Anyway, another thing on our list. Ready? Moving on.
Well, we had one more trailer.
Oh, did you? What else
Whatever,
did you show
I guess.
me?
Really quick, I just wanted to mention. Well, we don't have to go at length on this one.
Yeah. Which one?
I've been following these teasers the last month or so, or maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And for a film that was released by Neon, that was clearly a horror film, but the teasers didn't tell you. Now, I knew what the movie was because I just looked it up on Google, which you could have done. But the teasers were these liminal, moody kind of visual pieces for this film called Long Legs. That's directed by Osgood Perkins, who actually is the son of Psycho star Anthony Perkins. Now, this last week, the actual trailer for the film, which still doesn't really tell you too much about the movie. It just gives you sort of the vibe.
Yeah, it was tough for me to walk away feeling like not a little confused by
Well,
it.
I think it clearly is something in like the Seven, Zodiac, Manhunter space.
Yeah.
And it has Micah Monroe, who I said on Instagram when I was talking about the trailer this week, this movie has me at Micah Monroe. I mean, that's really all I need. If Micah Monroe is in the movie, I'm going to watch the movie. Like, there's a few names like that, like Mia Goth, Micah Monroe. If I see that name, I'm going to watch the movie. I don't care what the genre is. I don't care how much it is on iTunes. I'm going to watch it. So, in that realm, you should check out her film from last year called Watcher, if you hadn't. It's a really good movie about stalking. Anyway, it's her and Nicolas Cage in obviously a serial killer style film, right?
Yeah. I think it was. I have to admit, my only nitpicky thing was in the actual making of the trailer. I found myself more distracted by watching. There's like a slow reveal of the title. All the imagery is being cut behind the word slowly
It
forming.
reminded me of the opening of Alien.
Yeah, where
Where
it's
the
just
letters
lines
kind of
slowly.
form.
And
Yeah.
I kind of was more watching that the whole time to see what letters were forming than I was paying attention to anything from the story being shown behind it. So whether that's me or not, or other people don't have that experience, I found that to be a little distracting.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I love that type of ambiguous marketing, and the teasers in this. I can't speak to how the movie's going to be, obviously, but I'm going to watch it. I'll be getting it on iTunes the minute it's available. But I will say it made me want to go look into Osgood Perkins as a director. So I watched a movie of his this week called The Black Coat's Daughter.
I was just going to ask you a second ago. So is he a younger guy, older guy? I mean,
He's
does he have
younger.
a
I
career?
think this is his third film he's directed. I could be wrong.
All horror genre type stuff? Or
I would
suspense?
call there's a subgenre I want to create right now that I've used this term for a while. Horror adjacent.
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily call, to me, Longlegs doesn't look like a horror film in the same way you could say The Silence of the Lambs is not a horror
like Nefarious, when we were doing that same thing,
film.
right?
Nefarious, you would say, is not a horror film, yet it clearly has the horror DNA.
Yeah, yeah.
Longlegs kind of gives you that vibe. If you've ever seen Michael Mann's original Hannibal Lecter film that doesn't have Anthony Hopkins, where Brian Cox plays Hannibal Lecter, from the 80s called Manhunter, with William Peterson as Will Graham. This movie kind of gives me the Manhunter vibes. And I guess I would guess Nicolas Cage probably plays the serial killer. That's just my guess.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
But Black Coat's Daughter, I'm not going to say a thing about it because I think it's one of those films where the joy of it is going to be in its discovery.
Mm-hmm.
But great film. I saw that Kieran Shipka is in it, who is another actor I really, really love. And I was like, I'm sold. So I'm going to watch his other film is called Gretel and Hansel. And it almost looks like a weird kind of horror version of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
Even though Hansel and Gretel is a horror version of itself.
It's crazy, right? Yeah. There's been
As
some
is
good
it
hard
most fair.
takes on that
Brothers
story a
Grimm.
lot. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you're so desperate to move on from my trailer
I'm
section.
sorry. Geez, do you have anything else you
No, I
want to
guess
talk
that's
about?
it. Nobody
goodbye,
cares. We're not,
folks. See
good
ya.
night. All our viewers are just dropping off.
No, we could either jump into Smile or we could go into like the 80s.
Let's talk a little
stuff.
bit about some 80s and
Yeah,
90s movie
yeah.
memories.
I was excited to talk about this.
I have this feeling, I said this during the interview we did earlier today, that I think a lot of the people maybe watching this right now, certainly a lot of people that follow Haddonfield Radio, are probably around the same Generation X area that Joe and I are. Joe and I are both in our late 40s, and we would be Generation X. So I would assume, I would just get a vibe that a lot of the people who comment on our Haddonfield Radio
So far, the
videos,
ones we've actually have got a thing going with, we always find out, that they're around the same age.
I would assume a lot of you guys are probably fans outside of just the horror genre of 80s and 90s films, because that's certainly what Joe and I grew up on.
Yeah.
Now, where did you want to start? What you came up with
Well,
this
I want to preface
this
this too
topic.
with, we're thinking about along the lines of what we're about to start talking about, of actually doing sort of a Spotify series that's sort of along these lines of just our thoughts on 80s and 90s movies in general, not just horror.
Right.
So I don't know if anyone's digging anything we're talking about here, please let us know. But what I wanted to bring up, and I know we brought this up, I've been mentioning this lately on our recordings, is I kind of got reconnected with that movie Explorers again from my youth.
The
right?
Joe Dante film from the 80s. I think it's a great film.
Well,
it certainly hits me in the nostalgia button.
So that's what I want to talk about. Was I had this really weird experience, sort of reconnecting with it, because when I first saw this movie, when I was a kid, it was on VHS. I didn't see it in the theater, and I didn't ask for it or anything. It was one of those movies my father just got for us. It was in the house, and I watched it, fell in love with it, and I was just obsessed with it as a kid. I was like calling junkyards looking for tilt-a-whirls to build a spaceship out of, and I mean, I have the guy all ready to go, and then I get my mom.
But for context, you guys got to understand something. Joe was one of those kids that literally would build these things.
I was trying hard.
He was building, when he was a kid, he was building actual droids from Star Wars, but one-to-one size. and he was stuffing his friend Chris Nicini inside them to lumber around. What was that droid that he was inside?
The power droid.
The power
remember,
droid,
the
right?
conch, yeah. So anyway, so I was into it, man. I was dressed up. But my only context for this movie was this VHS I had. I think, like you just mentioned my buddy Chris, he maybe saw it because he'd be over and I would like to watch it. It wasn't something a lot of my friends talked about or were into, or it just wasn't on my radar in any other way, right? But I love this movie.
It basically it was panned and it sort of tanked at the box office.
See, that's what I'm getting to is I had no reference about the outside world's relationship with it. I
of course,
only
there's no internet.
had a beloved, association. I just loved it. And then I get older, and I'm now, I think I saw it once or twice again over the years if you happen upon TV, but I never owned it again till recently when I got the great Shout Factory version of the movie on Blu-ray, and I'm watching the movie again, loving it and stuff, and then I start watching all the extras, and there's a lot of good documentary, or really one big documentary made about the making of it, but it's interviewing a lot of the stars and Joe Dante now, right?
Right.
And that's when I learned that, this movie, it didn't make any money. It was like critically
and it was
panned.
like a brutal disappointment to Joe Dante. He was like heartbroken by this.
And even the thing about this started Ethan Hawke's whole career. This was his first movie. He was a kid. Was he 12, 13 maybe? And this crushed him. I mean, he said he was in a depression afterwards because it did nothing. Now there's a couple factors.
Of course, you have a very young River Phoenix.
Yep, and exactly. And it's funny because he sort of was like. He wanted to play the tough kid out of the three kids,
right?
And they just kind of said you weren't quite right, and they kind of forced him into the nerdy role. But it was really amazing to see him
and that's who you identified with, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
I used to literally dress up like his character.
There is a photograph that exists. I wish we could put it on camera right now.
No, we will never.
Come on, put it on.
No.
All right. What a big baby.
Anyway.
I want to say hi to Mike Jordan, brand new subscriber via our Haddonfield Radio Instagram page.
Hello.
Love you, brother. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us here. I'd love to know where you are. I'd love to know where all you guys are.
Yeah, feel free
There's
to shout it out there.
Watching from Scotland. That was very exciting. I'm half Scottish, so that's exciting to me. So anyway, as I'm learning more and more from this documentary, I'm realizing that this movie isn't thought of the way and it almost started to sour. Because I'm watching because I'm watching everyone involved with it talk about it like it was just like this awful, Joe Dante, he had a big fight with the studio. So basically the whole ending of the movie wasn't what he wanted. And it really left a bad taste in his mouth that he didn't get to make the movie mean what he wanted it to mean. And there's a lot of deleted footage and stuff you can watch. One of those classic stories of the director against the studio. And I, now I see it, but I definitely, my point is this, like, are there movies from your youth that you love? Yeah.
That when you get to look through a different lens, not the eyes of I was able to hold on to that childhood
100%.
lens for so long until I realized that like all these people, I wish I never almost watched that stuff.
There's a movie that's when you first brought up Explorers to me, I think when we were recording one of the last episodes.
Yeah.
I said, you know what, that movie always reminds me of this movie that Tobe Hooper made around the same time called Invaders from Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And I always associate these Explorers and Invaders from Mars for some reason in my mind in the same space.
Yeah.
So that made me, I hadn't thought of that movie, that Tobe Hooper movie, and I love Tobe Hooper. So I went right home and got it on iTunes and watched it. Perfect example of a movie that does not hold up to your childhood memories. It just doesn't work. At least now, but that's from my perspective of now.
That's what I mean.
I remember when I was like a younger person, I loved that movie. It's one of those movies I would rent like three times a month.
And that happens sometimes. You get older and you're like, oh, geez, you see it differently. But this was really, it was different because I had no outside. I had no other information about this movie ever. So I was able to really hold on to this childhood version of it in the way I loved it. And now I see how much the adults that worked on it who I don't think they realized they made like a cool kids movie. You know, I don't know what they were intending to do because they
Well, it
seem
comes
so
from that.
disappointed by how kid friendly it is. Is
It's
almost what they're. You
it's
know.
like a perfect example of that amazing pocket that happened in the 80s of those dark children's movies.
Right.
And it's not that Explorers or Neverending Story that Midwest Villain Z just brought up, or Gremlins, or any of these movies that are traditionally probably thought of as kids movies.
Yeah.
They appeal to anybody.
Yeah.
But they were definitely aimed at us in our youth.
Yeah.
And they were very dark.
Yeah.
Gremlins is a violent and dark movie. And Gremlins 2 is a cynical and dark movie that's you wouldn't think would be palatable to kids. Certainly the kids of now I don't think would respond to the style. If Gremlins was made in 2020 instead of 1980, it would have been a completely different movie.
Yeah, totally.
It wouldn't have that Joe Dante sense of humor and cynicism
that balance,
and personality.
That great balance, yeah, exactly.
A film of his from that period that still holds up for me and I've loved forever. I first saw it back when I had a television in my room as a kid, probably around 12 or 13 or even 11. And I had this UHF and VHF television with the rabbit ears. And WLVI TV 56 in Boston would play the 8 o'clock movie. And a lot of the times it was like, there was like, they had like 15 movies in their library that they could just rotate.
So
you would see the same movies at 8 o'clock over and over. So you would memorize these movies. And one of them was a Joe Dante that to this day is in probably my top 15 of all time is The Howling.
Yeah. I remember that you bought me the Blu-ray a long time ago. We were writing our werewolf script, the Red
Joe
River
and I,
script.
we did. We almost wrote like an update of. It was called Red River.
And you were like, make sure
right.
you watch this, and you bought it for me, and you gave me the
Make
Howling.
sure you watch and see exactly what I'm ripping off. Well, there is a particular shot in The Howling that's still to this day one of my favorite images from not just the 80s, but just horror. And it's when the camera's pulling away, the Dee Wallace is driven away, she's escaping from the werewolves, and you see a stop motion shot of people turning into werewolves. It's either done stop motion or literal animation in my mind and in my memory. And it has a very uncanny and haunting and eerie feeling. And that's Rob Bottin who did that incredible, Robert Picardo's incredible transformation into a werewolf.
Yeah.
And that movie is just, oh my God, that movie is so
It's
good.
It's great.
The Howling. Joe Dante, another one, Gremlins we talked about. You know what another one a lot of people don't talk about with Joe Dante from that period? Is Matinee.
I was just gonna say, I keep hearing about this movie Matinee.
You haven't seen Matinee?
And either I haven't seen it
Really
or I'm not
good.
associating the title with the movie, or but it's not coming to mind. And yeah, so we have a buddy right now from college, Jeff Rowland, who's working with Joe Dante on putting out a version of Matinee through I think Scream
Probably
Factory.
Had to be Scream Factory, yeah.
So
that's a perfect home for a movie like Matinee, and it's a perfect time I think for people to have that reintroduced into their like cinema vocabulary. It's like I said, it's not the first or even the second or even maybe the third or fourth Joe Dante movie that's gonna spring to mind.
Right.
But it's definitely worth a revisit.
Yeah. Oh no,
John
yeah,
Goodman. It's a very good movie. It's sort of about a fictionalized version of William Castle's story, and it's just really like a love letter to Joe Dante's youth, which was the 1950s, the cinema of the 1950s.
Yeah.
And I would argue that the interesting connection is the genre cinema of the 80s is like a mirror image in a lot of ways of the genre cinema of the 50s. The sci-fi movies, horror movies, and other genre movies. It just basically what I'm saying is that these 2 decades are just perfect.
It's amazing how much those the directors of the 70s and 80s, the John Carpenters, Joe Dantes, any of these guys, even Wes Craven, but like they are even though their films don't seem to necessarily always represent it, but they themselves are always trying to get back to these old genre films from their youth. You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
Even
100%.
though, even
John
though they're
Carpenter,
making,
all of
yeah.
them.
In fact, I'm going to try to remember to put.
John Carpenter was so obsessed with Howard Hawks.
Yeah.
And he wanted to make westerns.
Yep.
And I would argue that a few of John Carpenter's films are kind of like stealth westerns.
Yeah.
Vampires is one that comes to mind.
Big Trouble,
Ghosts
Little
of
China.
Mars. That I would call that. I would call Big Trouble in Little China is interesting that you could see it as a western, but it's almost like an eastern.
Yeah, but I think if you listen to him talk about it, if I'm remembering the
He's
interviews
addressed
correctly,
that as a western. Oh,
I
that's
think
interesting.
that was when he talks about influences. I have to try to remember to put a link. I'll try to do it in the comments for this video because I just recently stumbled upon a really great interview with John Carpenter while they're actually filming the original Halloween, and it's a British interview, which is why I don't think it makes the rounds a lot. And but he's being very candid. It's going on for a long time. You even get to see Donald Pleasance rehearsing scenes inside the house, and there's a lot of cool behind the
You should
scenes
link
stuff.
to this.
That's what I'm gonna do.
On
But
this
I
comment
have
section.
never heard John Carpenter talk with such candidness about where his influences were coming from at the time. Who like not for necessarily Halloween, but as a filmmaker. But the greatest thing I remember, I almost like spit out my drink, is he starts just sort of totally trashing Spielberg, who the interviewer starts asking him about Close Encounters, and then I think he brings up Jaws 2 and stuff, and he's just kind of like, yeah, no, I don't really like Spielberg stuff. He goes, but you have to remember, he was just a contemporary at the time. He wasn't the legendary Spielberg. He was just one of his, these other guys making films, obviously hit films, but still.
Right.
And Carpenter kind of just goes on this thing. That's not like what I want to do. That's not what I'm trying to make.
Well, you've got Spielberg at that time that was like the boy dandy of the studio system.
Right.
And Carpenter, who really was the maverick of cinema of that time, like a genre maverick.
But again, one of my points, I believe, if you listen to this interview, is Carpenter does bring up a lot how much he is envious and loved the studio system. Like he
worked within it.
Yeah, that's exactly. And he tries. It's really good. I'll have to put the link to it. But he addresses that whole thing, about.
Here's an interesting thing with 80s and 90s movie memories. I remember a lot of times, I was so obsessed with Fangoria magazine that I would know That's how you knew what horror movies were coming.
Yeah.
Pre-internet, obviously.
Yeah.
It was Gore Zone, Fangoria, Splatterhouse, all these cool magazines. And
I get Fangoria and Starlog.
Horror Hound is one of them now. Scream, Starlog.
I get the sci-fi and the
If I had already bought the Fangoria for the month and I was craving like that style, I would go and get that new issue of Starlog. And it always had cool stuff and horror adjacent stuff.
Yeah.
But so I would always I would have to convince my dad to take me to the movie theater. And there was a few movies from that period we would actually go and see, and this is the phenomenon I want to talk about. Have you ever done it where you see the movie at 7 and you like it so much you go back at 9:30 and see it again?
Oh God! Oh, well, back then, yeah, definitely more back then.
I've got a couple of them. One of them was Terminator 2.
I remember Jurassic Park.
There you go.
Yeah.
Terminator 2, my dad, we went on opening night, the Friday night. It was at Foxborough Cinema in Foxborough, Massachusetts. We went to the 7 o'clock, and this is like a tiny boutique theater in a suburb, a small suburb in Massachusetts. And the line, so it almost looks like just a small building. It's like a one-screen theater.
Yeah.
So the line was just literally wrapping, not around the entire building once, but like 2 or 3 times. And we got there like very early, hours early to get tickets.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the tickets for the 7, we got in, watched it. It's Terminator 2. I don't really need to describe how good it was. It's Terminator 2.
Yeah.
And it was so good, though, that my dad, we walked out. And I'll always remember, it's one of those, like, indelible movie memories. You want to go again? Like it's a ride.
Yeah.
So we got back in line and went to the 9:30. From Dusk Till Dawn is another one. Larry and I, our old late Larry DeGiusto, he passed away, but one of our close friends, I used to drag him to every horror movie that my dad wouldn't go to, or that I knew there was going to be boobs, so I didn't want to go with my dad. So we went to see From Dusk Till Dawn, 7 o'clock, loved it so much, went back at 9:30. I always remember that. Predator, saw it at Norwood Cinemas. Now, it was R-rated, and I was young for that one, me and my friend Michael Lee. My mom took us to Norwood Cinema. She asked the ticket taker, is there any nudity in this movie? She said, no, but it's very violent and full of adult themes and adult language. But is there any nudity? No. Okay, they're fine. Send them in. Let them go. And my friend Michael Lee and I saw the 7 o'clock and the 9:30 of Predator. Anyway, what any other ones you can think of?
I remember, but along the lines of trying to get into those movies, those types, I remember Chris and I used to try to get in. We tried to get into RoboCop,
Ooh,
and we couldn't.
that's a graphic one for
Well,
a
the
young
thing
person.
was, and this was again shows you how innocent you were as a kid. We saw the commercials and everything, and I guess we just never realized it was rated. We did not expect it to be rated R. We got there, we went up to get the ticket, and they're like, "No, you can't," because we just got dropped off. We had to go see Adventures in Babysitting instead.
Wow, I mean,
Which,
I'm actually a fan of that movie.
No, I know, yeah, and
but
there's-
that's not RoboCop.
Is that Danielle Harris in that? Is that
Danielle
one of
Harris
yes,
is in that
yes,
movie.
There's a
God,
Halloween tie.
That's a good link
I feel like
to
there's
Danielle
another
Harris.
Halloween tie somewhere or something.
It's funny, we were
or a
talking
Nightmare.
before we started this. Danielle Harris just the other night posted a really great candid photo to her Instagram page. Of course, she played Jamie Lloyd in Halloween 4,
Yeah.
4 and 5. Anyway, she was in the Tony Scott Bruce Willis movie The Last Boy Scout. I think she played Bruce Willis's daughter. And she posted a neat picture of her and Bruce Willis. It's really, and you were saying she was on what show was she on?
She did Roseanne.
Roseanne.
Yeah, back in the
She
day.
appeared on.
At some point.
Danielle Harris has had a great film she was in that she's excellent in that I feel like nobody ever talks about, and it's so good. And it almost is like a Walking Dead TV show aesthetic precursor film is the movie Stakeland. Have you guys ever seen
No.
Stakeland?
No.
If you haven't seen this movie, go watch this movie, Stakeland.
I thought I read too that she did recently a film with Robert Englund.
It was called
like Nanny Nook or Nana Nook or
Natty Knox or something
Natty
like
Knox.
that.
There
Was
we
it Natty
go.
Knox?
Natty Knox.
I've read a couple pans.
Is it a horror? I would
It's a
assume that-
horror movie, but I've read a
Okay,
couple pans. It's one of those
okay,
movies where they collect like a bunch of actors. I hate to say it's going to sound horrible,
Okay.
but they collect a bunch of actors from what I would call the convention crowd. Like a lot of these actors from 80s and 90s horror see each other on like a weekly basis now,
Yeah.
even if they weren't all in the same movies at these conventions where
Yeah.
they have like their side hustle.
Yeah.
And I think a movie like Natty Knox comes out of that culture where you have like 3 or 4. It was like Bill Moseley, Danielle Harris, Robert Englund. I could almost imagine them, and I don't know this happened, but I'm guessing that this comes from convention culture.
Mm-hmm.
Just my thought.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I'm just taking. I haven't wikied Natty Knox, so I don't know. Let's see. Let's look at a few comments.
Well, I was gonna say Midwest Villain Z brought up how T2 is one of he thinks is the best action movie in probably a better sequel, or a case where the sequel is better than the original.
He's
And
saying the best action movie ever made.
that's
a
a
big
big
one.
statement.
While I do think it would be in the top 10 of anybody's objective list.
This reminds me though of the whole conversation in Scream when they actually literally bring up this exact thing, or in the second
yeah,
Scream
you're right.
too,
Yeah,
to talk
that's a
about when
good point.
sequels are
Another
better.
good
But
connection.
anyway,
I want to throw out a lot of times, like I'm a person who compulsively makes lists. Like for decades, I've had my favorite film of the year lists. I can look back through my notebooks over the years and tell you 1996 what my favorite 10 films were. But anyway, I make lots of different lists. But one thing I don't ever say is like best films because obviously it's so subjective,
sure,
right?
sure.
But my favorite action film of all time is a movie that bucks my trend, and I would say it is the best action film objectively of all time. Would you like to know what it is?
Please, I'm
Gareth Evans' The Raid 2. Now, Gareth Evans' The Raid is one of the greatest action films ever made. I think not only does The Raid 2 outdo it and outpace it, I think it is the best action film ever made. And I also think it contains the greatest car chase ever in cinema.
better than French
So
Connection.
chew
huh?
on those two fun facts. I don't know. Predator would be up there.
No,
There's
yeah,
so many.
definitely.
But you got to think internationally. That's the problem. Are we talking about American film? Are we talking internationally? Because when you take the into an international, The Raid would be considered an international film. So would The Raid 2.
Okay.
But I think you could make a 2 lists, international and American. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on best action film ever made.
When did Raid 2 come out?
This, I would guess it's early to mid-aughts.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
Okay.
If you guys haven't seen The Raid or The Raid 2 by Gareth Evans, you gotta go watch The Raid and The Raid 2. They're masterpieces of action cinema. But The Raid 2, I remember in the day when it was John Woo. John Woo was
Wow.
the greatest action director
Sure.
of all time, but he's sort of like, I have to admit, I watched Silent Night, his most recent film with Joel Kinnaman, and it has no personality. It's not a terrible. I was gonna say it's terrible, but it's not terrible.
Well,
It's
he's
just
almost
it could have been directed by anybody.
but did it feel like the John Woo thing?
No, no
Oh,
doves,
really?
no slow mo. Well, there was a little slow mo, but
Oh,
no
oh.
doves.
Say, because he almost made himself into like his
Like
own.
a trope.
Yeah, exactly.
He troped himself.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's what he did. That's the
Yeah.
truth. But I still would argue like Broken Arrow totally undervalued in the action genre. I love Broken Arrow. Face Off, of course, is a Stone Cold classic. Hard Boiled, City of Fire, City on Fire. All these movies, like, I'm not saying John Woo is not an action master, but I remember back in the 90s,
Yeah.
if you were who's the greatest action director, you would say John Woo. And then I think it all sort of went onto like a left turn when he directed Mission Impossible 2, which isn't a terrible movie. I actually don't think it's the worst Mission Impossible movie. I think they're all good movies. But I think something about him getting to that level of franchise filmmaking, that's not something of his creation. I think his career sort of
Yeah.
got knocked off track a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was hoping Silent Night was going to be a John Woo film. It just, if you didn't tell me John Woo directed it, I would never have guessed that. That's my
Gotcha.
damning
Interesting.
thing to say.
I thought it would have been just so John Woo wasn't impressive anymore.
No, unfortunately, no. It didn't have enough person. I wanted more John Woo personality.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else? Any other ones that you remember offhand that you love from the 80s and 90s? What was like?
Well, I mean, take any of the Schwarzenegger. When I was a kid
Oh,
growing up
God,
in the
yes.
80s for action, Commando, you remember that one with Alyssa Milano? I could watch that one all day, and when he throws the saw blade into the dude's head out of the shed, oh my God!
it
I lived
has.
for that as a kid.
If you want to, there's never been a better movie of Arnold Schwarzenegger oiled up. If you really are craving seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger covered in baby oil, well, the best you can get is going to be Commando. That would be my one sentence review.
What was the one he did in the 80s where it was like Soviet
Red Dawn? No, Red Heat.
Red Heat? Red Heat.
I always want to say Red Dawn because Red Dawn, Red Heat.
Red Dawn. Oh my God.
Love it.
Oh my God. And that was another one, like, it was on VHS in the house as a kid, and I watched that a lot.
I want to say hello to John Michael Barnett. We love you, John Michael Barnett. Thank you for showing up and hanging out with us. We really appreciate you. Red Dawn, you know what's funny about Red Dawn? Red Dawn is actually quite a scary film.
It is. It
And
scared the crap out of me as a kid.
In the 80s context of watching a movie in the 80s where you're seeing a suburb taken over by the Russians.
Yeah.
And it has that creepy scene
When
of
they're
the parachutes
yes,
descending.
Yes. And then the idea of them when they're all in the woods and they're
It's
just...
almost like post-apocalyptic in the woods.
It is. That's what I mean. When you're,
It's very
I
dark.
remember always feeling very nervous about the idea of like young people, kids having to suddenly not only survive, but they're trying to take out, a whole army of Soviets.
Literally an army.
Yeah.
Wolverines!
Oh God.
No, I
and
love,
then some of them die. You know what I mean? It's not like the kids make it.
and it was such a great collection of actors like you
Oh.
would get in like The Outsiders.
Yes.
You have C. Thomas Howell. You
Patrick
have Patrick
Swayze.
Swayze. You
Jennifer
have
Grey.
Powers Booth, Jennifer Grey, and the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
What's his name? He played C. Thomas Howell's father. He gets brought into the prison camp.
Right. Yes.
Harry Dean Stanton.
Yes.
I just want to say I love Patrick Swayze. I want to tell you something. About
Who
a year
doesn't?
ago, I decided I wanted to refresh my mind on some of the classic Patrick Swayze performances. So there was like a week or two where I was basically just watching Patrick Swayze movies, and I had the time of my life. I want to tell you something. A movie from
You just made a pun. Dirty Dancing.
That was an accident.
Time of my life. Oh, sorry.
That's
Right.
if we ever do a greatest hits clip reel, that's going on it.
All right.
I just want to say though, one of them that really stood out from this 80s and 90s, and it really does hold up, and it's awesome. This is like preaching to the choir here. I bet a lot of you could guess which Patrick Swayze movie I'm going to say, but it's Roadhouse.
Yeah. I figured
And there's a
most
Jake
everyone loves
Gyllenhaal version that's about to come to Amazon
Really?
Prime, which doesn't give me a lot of
Oh,
confidence.
man.
Directed by Doug Liman, who made Mr. and Mrs. Smith and The Bourne Identity, amongst things. He
Mhm.
made a great film, Doug Liman, I think it might have been his first film, called Go. That was sort of like a Quentin Tarantino riff. when
Sounds
everyone was
familiar,
trying to
yeah.
be Quentin Tarantino in the
Sure,
mid '90s. This one's really good. Timothy Oliphant from the Scream
Yep,
franchise.
yep.
And a great big cast. Sarah Polley, a big, great cast. It's kind of like a great '90s film. But Roadhouse, I'm going to watch the Jake Gyllenhaal 2024 film, but you can't beat Patrick Swayze. And Ben Gazzara was the villain in that, and you can't beat that either.
Midwest Villain Z once again dropping a great one. Total Recall. I mean, come
Total
on.
Recall.
Come
And then he
on.
mentions the 3-boob bar chick.
Of course. Yeah, your voice cracked on that one.
But
You okay?
because in the midst of that little reference, I hit puberty.
It happened.
Finally.
No, that was a great one. I mean, that was like one of those groundbreaking, like because of the effects, and it was a good movie. It was awesome. Was that Paul? I'm not going to say his name.
Paul
right.
Verhoeven.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's one of his
Yes.
best. And another with effects by my personal, I always say my favorite makeup effects artist of all time, but there's actually two artists who are so interconnected in my mind that I can't say one's one and one's two. But for the point we're making of Total Recall, it's Rob Bottin who did those incredible practical effects.
Yep.
I'm going to say Rob Bottin, I always say this to myself when I'm having this conversation with myself. Rob Bottin is the Mozart of special effects makeup. And I would say Dick Smith is the Beethoven. But if there's a Bach, it's Tom Savini. Those are my big three.
Did you just come up with that top of your head?
Not just flow. I
composers
think
and
because I did that, I had a time of my, what is it? I've had the time of my life,
Yeah,
accidental
okay.
reference. Now I'm firing on all cylinders.
I-
Now this live stream has become
That's it.
live.
That's it. We're ready to go. We've
It's
started.
my live stream
that
of
was just like the
consciousness.
opening number, and now we are ready to go. Here comes the main act.
This is really, this is the real me you're getting right now. And this is sort of Joe. I'd say this is sort of Joe. Basically Joe.
Anyway,
yeah. Now, Midwest Villain Z was getting all the comments here. I'm going to see Ghost in my local theater soon. Do you mean Ghost the band?
no, I think because you were talking about the Patrick Swayze movies.
Oh, Ghost!
Ghost.
The Patrick Swayze.
Come on, stay with me. Stay with me.
You're losing
now.
me. You had me for a minute
You're
there,
still
and now...
you're trying to come up with more song references, aren't you? Okay.
Yeah, but great band from Sweden, Ghost. Well, I say band, it's one guy, but he does have a band and a whole giant theatrical mythology and presentation. It's actually really, really interesting. And Ghost is horror adjacent.
They did a song for one of the movies.
For one of the David Gordon Green movies, didn't they? Halloween movies? I want to say it was one of the end credits of one of the David Gordon Green Halloween movies.
Yeah, it's not coming to me right now.
I think.
But anyway.
But Ghost, Patrick Swayze, probably my least favorite Patrick Swayze movie of that era. That one I actually didn't really have a great time watching on the rewatch. Another one that I love, we talked about Red Dawn. We talked about Roadhouse.
Did he ever do a horror or a sci-fi flick?
Yes, I was just going to bring it up.
Yeah, what?
Donnie Darko.
Oh my God!
Hello, he's the teacher.
Oh my God!
And he does those like self-help guru
Yeah.
videos like fear.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wet my pants anymore. You know what? When I was rewatching Donnie Darko, I love Donnie
that
Darko, but I
movie.
haven't watched it in probably 10 years. I forgot Seth Rogen is in that movie.
Wow, I did too. Till I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember really.
And I realized the connections are
soundtrack.
still flowing
I like
because
the
that's
soundtrack.
another Jake Gyllenhaal movie.
Oh, yeah, look at you. Look
I'm
at you.
killing it tonight.
Oh boy.
Any love for Cobra, Matthew, you asked.
Yo, this guy.
There was a Haddonfield radio
Yeah.
episode where I brought up Cobra because what I love about George P. Cosmatos' Cobra with Sylvester Stallone is this. Cobra is an 80s testosterone-fueled action movie welded together with a slasher film.
Yeah.
And it's just like how Terminator, the original Terminator, is like a 80s sci-fi movie welded together with a slasher film. So, but Cobra is a much more a strident example of that. And I think it works. It's like Sylvester Stallone against Michael Myers. That's what Cobra really is in a lot of ways. And Brian Thompson, who plays the serial killer of Cobra, he's like, nobody talks about that character in the slasher genre because Cobra, of course, isn't classified as a slasher movie. But I would say Cobra is a slasher movie with 80s
Why
action
isn't it
elements.
a slasher movie? Would be the question.
But I love this notion. If you wanted to bring slasher films like into the 2020s or going forward, I love going back to that idea where you use slasher movie, quote unquote, and you kind of Trojan horse it into another genre.
That's serious. Yeah, yeah.
I really love that, like putting a slasher movie idea in another genre. And Cobra does that beautifully.
Well, I mean, back then a lot of these movies were written as vehicles for the stars too, right? So that that was a way to get Sylvester Stallone out of boxing and just
or just from a cynical marketing perspective, they saw that these slasher films were making money, and they wanted to jump on that bandwagon, so to speak, within the action genre.
Yep.
Now, Mike Hatfield just brought up an incredible film that, again, is not traditionally considered a slasher film, but certainly qualifies, and that's Silent Rage, the Chuck Norris movie. Another perfect parallel, Mike Hatfield to Cobra. Perfect. That would make an excellent double feature, now that I think about it.
Oh, wow. Maybe we should do a trailer park. Cobra,
oh, my God.
Cobra,
that
Silent Rage.
would be a great
The trailers
trailer
for both
park.
that. We're going to work that in. Yeah.
You know, this also kind of fits in with 80s and 90s memories because George P. Cosmatos, I love that director. He made Rambo, First Blood 2. Yep. A movie I watched a week ago. I bought it because it was $1.99 on iTunes, and I was like, I have not seen this movie since 1989, and I went to the theater to see it. George P. Cosmatos, Peter Weller movie called Leviathan.
Oh, God, yes.
Remember Leviathan?
I loved Leviathan.
So I dragged my dad to see Leviathan, which is a B-level, it's in that horror sci-fi subgenre of deep sea miners.
Yeah. Was it before or after The Abyss? And
who knows? It basically is like The Abyss with a sea monster, a genetically mutated sea monster instead of aliens.
Yeah.
But you get a great 80s Peter Weller performance. In the 80s, Peter Weller was one of my favorite genre actors, so... But the funny thing is, a week later, after Leviathan came out, I dragged my dad to Leviathan. He wasn't thrilled about it. A week later, I'm like, we've got to go to the theater and see this movie called Deep Star 6.
Oh, wow. That was a piece of crap.
That was actually directed by Sean S. Cunningham, who directed Friday the 13th.
Right.
And it's basically almost the same film as Leviathan. I know they were released within a week or two of each other. So I bring my dad to see Deep Star 6, which he wasn't thrilled about. And in 10 minutes in the movie, he goes, didn't we just go and see this movie? Like, no, that was Leviathan. This is Deep Star 6.
You fell asleep during a different movie, Dad.
The Deep Star 6 poster I still love. And it is like as though a winch is pulling a deep sea diver out of the water, and a giant crab monster has bitten off his lower half.
What didn't one of them have? Which one had the girl? Was it Amanda Palmer or something Palmer? So Amanda Palmer, a British.
I know who you're talking about.
Something
and that's
like
Leviathan.
that. Is it Leviathan? Yeah.
I think I could be wrong.
Something like Amanda Palmer. I can't remember her name, but something.
Leviathan also had Hector Elizondo, Daniel Stern.
Right.
But George P. Cosmatos also directed Cobra. He is listed as the director of one of my favorite westerns of all time, Tombstone. But
that is the only movie I have ever walked out of the theater during.
Tombstone with Kurt Russell?
I did.
In Val Kilmer.
I did. I did.
That's insanity.
I did. Yeah.
It's one of the greatest westerns ever made. It's either it's early 90s or late 80s, but I'd guess early 90s. We have the internet in front of us.
In my defense, I will say I do think some of it was just my age at the time, and I was more wrapped up in all the people and friends I was with, and there was a lot of not paying attention to the movie.
93. We were seniors in high school.
I was in high school.
That makes a little more sense.
I think I don't think I was watching it objectively. Now I could probably appreciate it, but I have to admit I've never gone back. I know there's all the famous lines, "You're my Huckleberry" and all that stuff, and we walked out. Yeah.
I think it's a masterwork. I think it's Val Kilmer's greatest
I just think
performance.
we probably had other things we wanted to go do.
But the funny thing about that movie is even though George Cosmatos is listed as the director, and he was on set for a portion of the time.
Yeah.
The widely understood now, what used to be sort of an urban legend in film, but now has basically been confirmed, is that Kurt Russell basically logistically directed that movie
Oh, really?
and shepherded it from its inception as an idea
Yeah.
up through getting it into the theaters.
Wow.
But I guess there was a lot of behind the scenes problems. But I'm shocked you walked out of that one.
I think it was more age and whatnot, being silly.
Mike
but-
Hatfield's asking if we recall Universal Soldier. Yes, Roland Emmerich movie. Might have been his first mainstream American film, Roland Emmerich. Jean-Claude Van Damme,
Yes,
Dolph
yes.
Lundgren.
Yeah, I was just say Dolph Lundgren keeps popping in my head. Yeah, I think I haven't seen it probably since it came out.
Jean-Claude Van Damme film from that period that I really like and still like, that again I dragged my father to have to take me to see, was Cyborg.
Oh, God.
And
yeah.
Cyborg, even back then,
Yes.
was already kind of infamous because Van Damme had actually blinded another actor on set
Oh, wow.
with a kung fu move that went wrong.
Well, yeah, I'd say so.
And he spent 2 years in litigation because he Kill Bill-esque plucked another actor's eyeball out or something. So that's what I remember about Cyborg.
That sounds like
I can
horror
tell you though,
movie
I
fake
have such
shit
a
right
bizarre. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday, but I can tell you
Yeah,
Albert Pyun
I will-
directed that movie.
there. I will say your memory for all the different films and the directors. I can't remember who directed the Halloween movies that we just covered for the last year, but
I don't have a girlfriend. I live alone in a room in a basement with a
you
chihuahua.
have Walter.
I literally live in a basement at my parents'
Walter's
house.
the Chihuahua. by
I'm
the
going to
way.
be 49 years old. I live in the
Wow,
basement
you're
of their house
You're really
in one
throwing
room,
it out there, huh?
and I sleep in bed with a 15 or 16-year-old chihuahua named Walter. There's a lot of personal information you're getting
I
today.
might be editing this video.
I'm lonely.
So-
I guarantee there's not one woman listening to this, but if there is, I'm lonely. So anyway, what else? Any other movie memories?
At the moment, no. I'm a little distracted.
Viva La Video Store, Mike Hatfield says. We can't stop talking about that subject.
Yeah.
All I'll say is Joe and I are currently discussing and developing an idea that relates to video store memories
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to develop for the Spotify channel, a podcast series. So
Probably branching out from horror.
if you guys are interested in all in this kind of subject matter we're sort of testing the waters with right now for this little section.
We'll always be doing Haddonfield Radio and covering
Yeah,
our horror
the
movie
YouTube
stuff on
channel is
YouTube.
always going to remain horror.
But we're thinking about talking about some other stuff too
on Spotify.
on Spotify. Yep,
we
just
have,
to listen
in
to.
case you're wondering, we have right now. We do already have audio-only podcast versions of our Haddonfield Radio episodes. If you ever just want to pop your earbuds in and listen to our episodes, you can do that on our Spotify channel.
Mhm.
But we are going to be developing a Spotify series that Joe and I will do about 80s and 90s
Yeah,
movies,
later this
video
year.
store era movies.
Yep.
So
But
yeah.
how about
Why don't we move on to our next
actually do
subject?
one of our reviews here with the movie Smile?
Now, I wouldn't necessarily call it we're going to do here a review because it's almost a 2-year-old movie.
Well, yeah, our opinions.
For Joe, it's brand new because he
Yeah,
only
I
saw
never
it last
watched it.
night.
Well, what can I
He
say?
finally, 2 years later, gets around to it.
The good thing about doing these is you force me to finally watch a movie, so I know I have to be able to talk about it in front of people. And I admit I am really bad at catching up and watching all the movies that I should be at.
In Joe's defense, I'm throwing 6 movies a day at him, so it's a deep bench
well,
of
so
recommendations.
and we'll get there. But when you told me you were going to have a Scream 7 pitch,
Right.
and I realized that wow, I'm really behind on my whole Scream everything. A large amount of my time lately has actually been devoted to sort of that. But I'm so happy you told me to watch Smile. If you guys haven't seen it,
Hello, Sandy
go see
Peterson.
it.
We love you, Sandy Peterson.
See, there's
Sandy Peterson says she loves Smile. I
Yeah.
think obviously a lot of people did. It made $217 million.
I mean, look at
in
that.
its domestic and
with
international
a
box
budget
office.
of only 17 million.
Smile, of course, from 2022, directed by Parker Finn.
Mhm.
Obviously, a mainstream horror movie. I found 2022 to be one of the best years of horror of the last 10 years. I wouldn't say decade because we're still only 4 years into this decade.
Yeah.
But of the last 10 years, 2022 was one of the best years. And it was bookended by 2 horror blockbusters. Of course, Zach Kreger's Barbarian and Parker Finn's Smile. Now, Joe and I both wanted to kind of talk about this movie through Haddonfield Radio, and so we just chose this venue to do it.
Yeah.
We're not really reviewing. We just wanted to talk about a movie. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
this isn't like our other things. I didn't do a lot of research. I literally just watched the movie, and I
Right.
want to talk about it. No, now, we
But
also should mention that
Tell them what else we watched.
we watched the short film that Parker made originally called Laura Hasn't Slept, right?
That premiered at the South by South Film Festival, I think, in 2020.
Yep.
And it was what got
Paramount Yep.
interested in developing Smile as a feature film.
And really, it's not like seeing some like just a different smaller version of Smile. It is its own sort of thing that is just very closely related to what becomes Smile. But I actually think it's like a modern reimagining or just a new take on the idea of what sort of Nightmare on Elm Street is when you watch that original short, Laura Hasn't Slept.
Absolutely.
You know?
Because Laura Hasn't Slept, the original short film, introduces the trauma demon from Smile more as something that comes through her dreams.
And she says, she starts in the short film saying like, because she's kind of talking to her therapist, and she says, do you think that if you get hurt in your dreams, you can be killed? Can you
Which
be
is
killed in
straight
your
out of the
dreams?
Nightmare on Elm Street
Right, and be
playbook.
killed in real life.
Right.
And that's what she says. I feel like if this guy I'm dreaming about kills me, I'm gonna die. So, and it's the same thing. Seeing the same protagonist or antagonist in her dreams coming after her, and feeling like your life is in danger. Now, obviously, they do some very original things. They have their own spin on everything. Some really creepy stuff.
I read today an interesting thing that I had never heard. Do you know the original title for the screenplay was Something's Wrong with Rose?
Interesting. For the movie.
For the Smile movie.
Right.
Paramount decided to change that to Smile, which I think was a very smart marketing idea.
Yeah.
Because beyond a feature film adaptation of the short film, what I think Smile could be is the next really big mainstream horror franchise.
Oh yeah, you could keep going back to this world. The whole premise revolves around a chain.
Yeah, why don't you
that
explain, for just in
continues.
case, explain the general gist.
Well, with the idea is basically that in this world, without getting to all the details of the specific characters, but basically, once you see somebody kill themselves that has been infected by this demon, then it is passed on to you, and you are now being sort of taunted by this demon to the point where it will eventually inhabit you and make you kill yourself.
Well, what it wants you to do, just
And-
like any virulent virus, what it wants you to do is infect other people. And the
Yeah.
way it gets you to do that, it torments you to the point where you commit suicide, but it wants you to do it in front of somebody else in order to pass this trauma along. And the trauma is the chain. So this general hook. Now, I want to say something. I think I said this on a previous episode of Haddonfield Radio, this concept, but something about horror in the horror genre that to me is similar to music, and Joe and I have done various bands and have written a lot of songs. When you're doing songwriting, what you're looking for, the best thing you can find is those hooks.
Yeah.
In the horror genre, I think sometimes what works similarly is these horror movies that come up with these incredible hooks. And Smile is a film with one of those incredible hooks.
And it has a set of sort of rules, like it has, you
Which
know what
I
I mean?
also love in the horror genre.
Right.
Rule-based stories.
Because the only way to break this chain is to commit murder yourself, but you have to do it again in front of somebody so
Somebody
that
else
that
has to
trauma
witness
can
it.
be passed on.
So you're still passing on
on
violent trauma.
but you can survive it if you commit the murder yourself.
Right.
Right. But so clever, very clever, and I thought it was very interesting that he took away pretty much completely the dream aspect from the short film Laura Hasn't Slept when he went in to make Smile. It had nothing.
Yeah.
There was no.
Well, I can understand from a storytelling perspective, my instinct would tell me that what you're doing by removing that from the rules right off the bat in the film version of it, you're taking like a fence off.
Yeah.
In letting it just exist in the world where it can infect different people different ways. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I love that idea of something being passed on like a virus, like a virulent, like I said, like a virulent virus. I love that, like something that's a mixture of the physical and the supernatural in a way.
And they do that thing again. I feel like it's a offshoot of some ideas brought up in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, where you're messing with the viewer's reality, and although they take away the dream aspect, while these people are being taunted by the demons, they are constantly hallucinating, and you go through many scenes in the movie where you think you're dealing with one thing, and then something happens within the reality to make you realize, oh, this isn't
Well,
isn't actually real.
I would argue that the easy read of subtext for Smile is mental illness.
Well, yes,
But I think the
huge
deeper reading
suicide
of it
trauma thing.
is the contagion of mental illness. Somebody that spends time caring for people or in the direct, intimate vicinity of somebody else that is deeply mentally ill
Yeah,
can distort the other person's mental health as well.
yeah,
And so, while I think that's just one of those like human things that makes the movie even more frightening, but it adds like this layer of guilt. It's not just trauma in a way. It's a transmission of guilt and trauma is what I think is very interesting. And the idea that even considering this idea that the contagion of mental illness makes me feel guilty for even thinking that. It almost
Yeah.
feels like it comes from a place of not having empathy.
and I'm wondering if maybe either I didn't totally see it, or if there's a tie between the idea that her trauma personally is from her mother's
Her
suicide.
mother's suicide.
So again, we have this idea of suicide. And were they implying at all that her mom was a victim
I've
of
read
any of
on
this?
Reddit that there are people who have speculated that.
And that she actually had it
And that she may have actually had it from all the way back
when
then.
she was a kid, yeah. But she was able to also prove how the chain came from
Right.
other people. So I don't know if you're just reading.
I want to talk a
Too
little bit
much
about
there,
something
but-
about this, tangentially, is that they are making a Smile 2. I don't think it'll be called Smile 2,
Yeah.
but a sequel to Smile, with Parker Finn returning. But Sosie Bacon, who played Rose, obviously
Yeah.
is not going to return because she's, spoilers, the
Yeah,
character dies.
Doesn't make it, which was surprising. You thought I figured.
However, Kyle
was.
Gallner's character of her police ex-boyfriend,
Yeah.
he is the one who witnesses her
Right,
suicide,
exactly.
so theoretically he would
could
now be
continue it.
infected.
Or we'll hear how he
But
passed
I
it
don't
on.
think that's going to be the direction they go, and I'm going to give you my theory as to
okay.
where the sequel's going to go. First part of my theory is this. I think
Prequel?
it all hinges on the scene where Kyle Gallner's character and Sosie Bacon's character, Rose, go to visit the one man who broke the chain in a way by
yeah.
murdering someone in the proximity of a witness.
Yeah.
In this character of Robert Talley, he's locked up in prison for murder, or he's awaiting trial for murder, but he's in jail. And she goes to find out what he did differently. And in that scene, the character of Robert Talley, the inmate, mentions that in his research, there was a chain in Brazil
Right. That's
where
as
he
far
saw
back
that
he could take
it
yeah.
ended because a woman murdered somebody to transmit the virus to a bystander. So that's where he got the idea. Now, jump ahead. Recently, they announced the main character of what will be the Smile sequel has been cast, and I'm going to tell you who it is. I'm just blanking on her name. Naomi Scott is the actor, and she played Princess Jasmine in the Disney Aladdin
okay.
live action.
Yeah.
That's one big place. She was in the Charlie's Angels remake that came out not that long ago with Kristen Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
She, to me, has the complexion and the look of somebody that you could cast as Brazilian. Now, I know in this current sissy 2020s studio system era, well, you'd have to be Brazilian to play a Brazilian, or you have to be trans to play trans. You have to be gay to play gay. Which I find to be an affront to the art of acting. All this new woke, political correct ideas that really stem from people who have nothing to do with acting. They're just kind of culture police. that have come up with this new rule now that, like I just said, that like if you're not gay, you can't play a gay character. If you're not from Georgia, you can't play a character from Georgia. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
It's actually just a destructive agent to acting itself, where the general principle of acting is one person can wear all faces to humanize all people, which is what acting is supposed to be when it's done right.
Didn't you see Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa?
Hugh Grant was not born in Oompa Loompa, and he should be canceled for playing one.
No, I get you.
You know what I'm saying? I hate that.
The whole thing is based on
That
pretending
woke
to be people
bullshit.
you're not, right? So
Right.
Anyway.
So, anyway, do I think Naomi Scott's going to play a Brazilian woman? No. But I do believe, if I was to make a guess, that that's where the first sequel is going. I don't think
Gotcha.
it's going to follow Kyle
just
Gallner.
kind of give us its own
I don't
new
think it's going
story.
to go. In other words, I
Yeah.
don't think the narrative and mythology of Smile is going to go in a linear fashion.
Right.
I think the sequel is going to build more into the mythology of the trauma demon that I only found out also today. Apparently, when they were making the movie, they referred to the creature as the monstrosity.
Huh.
Which I'm not too crazy about.
Interesting.
I think trauma demon is cool.
I thought it was really cool, like the actress you're seeing on the poster right there, who plays the patient that
Laura, the character
gives
of Laura.
Laura that gives the demon to the main character of Smile, but she was the actress from Laura Hasn't Slept,
Right.
And I thought it was great that they brought her back,
And that could be the most iconic scene from Smile.
oh yeah,
is
yeah,
that opening
of
scene.
course. Yeah,
Now-
she's really terrifying. Like her ability to play terrifying is terrifying.
My mother is a diehard Kevin Bacon fan.
Wow.
Even beyond, she like goes and sees the Kevin Bacon band. Okay,
The Bacon Brothers?
The Bacon Brothers. My mother loves her some Kevin Bacon. So when I saw Smile in 2022 and was completely blown away by it. Now let me just tell you, of the last literally 24 years, let's say since the turn of the 21st century, Smile is one of my two favorite horror films. Smile by Parker Finn and David Pryor's The Empty Man. Those are my two favorite horror films of the 21st century so far. So I said, Mom, you've got to see Smile because my mom watches every TV show and every movie. It has Kevin Bacon's daughter, Sosie Bacon. My mom could not get past that scene where the girl carves the smile on her face.
Yeah.
She said she had to shut it off. That was the end. She didn't want to go any further. So I
Yeah.
get it. And
Yeah.
Joe said he was pretty terrified watching it.
It was the suspense stuff. This is one of those movies that plays on the, someone telling you to like look behind you, and you're just like you're waiting for the reveal as you're seeing the character. And of course, I am watching it down in my dark, dingy basement late
where
at
we
night.
are right now, I might say.
And I definitely paused it a few times because I was getting the goosebumps so bad. I had to keep distracting myself for a minute. I'd read my emails and I'd put it back on because I had to lose the. I didn't want to look behind my shoulder, and that's a great, thing of a quality of a movie if it can do that, and
Especially to like a grown man.
No, it's like I'm sitting there literally watching it, going like, why am I doing this? This is like, I gotta
But
watch it to
that's
talk about it. I
effective
know,
art.
I
It's
know,
just effective art.
that's good. That's great. You want that afterwards when you're thinking about the horror movie and you're like, wow, I was so scared.
I think what's really great about Smile is it rides this really great line between being a very mainstream 21st century horror, jump scare oriented horror film, and also it's kind of like a classy horror film that has a deep bench mythology and has a lot of room to grow in terms of its narrative and storytelling. And I think the camera work is really great.
I can't believe I haven't talked about it. The camera work, I was blown away by the
It's
cinematography.
beautifully shot.
Whoever the cinematographer is, I meant to look it up, but they do these really, really unique moves with the camera that are like, well, first of all, one thing they do a lot is they're flipping the horizon around, so the sky's on the bottom, and that really is kind of disorienting and creates a striking visual sometimes when they give you some city shots.
The name is Charlie Saroff,
Well,
cinematographer.
Chuck, you did good. It was like there's all these, and they did it in Laura Hasn't Slept Yet, where the camera almost goes 360, where the character is in a room. It's usually dark. They think there's something in there with them, so they're looking, and you're looking the whole way around too, and you kind of come back to where you started. Sometimes you land back on the main character.
I love those types of subjective
but
shots.
sometimes there's maybe something for a brief second, just as it's panning like a creature, or sometimes you do land back and now the creature's there. It's great.
It's like a scene that's shot where it's directed in a way where it's not allowing you to look away.
It's very mechanical.
It's taking you into something that feels scary and dangerous, and without letting you turn away.
It's I don't know how to, it's a quality to the camera work that isn't. I don't know how to describe the difference between that and a normal pan, but there's something about this that makes it. Maybe it's because it's so deliberate, where even though you see the main character, suddenly your eyes become it as soon as the camera moves away from them, and you're watching with them. I don't know. It was unique. It kept.
I would definitely agree with that.
I kept noticing it, and in a good way.
I
like,
read
wow,
in a little of my. I just did an afternoon of research.
Yeah.
But some of the shots are actually designed to be smiles.
Oh, I can totally see that. Probably, yeah.
Which is really cool and really subliminal and cool.
Oh, there's little happy faces and smiles everywhere in the background. All sorts of subliminal stuff for sure.
John Michael Barnett says, "I don't usually scare easy, so I'm going to have to see this movie." So, like Joe, he also hadn't caught up on Smile. I guess there are people who haven't seen it in the horror community.
I won't give it away too much then, but. But I do scare easily. That's the thing.
On an upcoming another one of these live streams, I'm going to get to David Pryor's The Empty Man. So, which came out I think in 2021. So between now and then, do yourself a favor if you haven't seen it, watch it. So when we talk about it, you'll have seen it. Because surprisingly, a lot of people haven't seen it, even though it is literally already considered like a cult classic, even though it was only released a couple of years ago. David Pryor is a really interesting director. He cut his teeth as like an acolyte of David Fincher, working for David Fincher. And outside of The Empty Man is his first major film. It's an adaptation of a comic book. And it's 2.5 hours long. So it's literally an epic. And it is an epic. And I would say if you watch the first 30 minutes of The Empty Man and you're not completely hooked, then I'm going to have to show up in your doorstep and take your horror card away. And I will do it.
My only very small criticism of Smile was that maybe it could have been a little shorter. I feel like there was some of the side story, just like family bullshit that was kind of going on, which it all matters. I think it just could have been told a little quicker, like with her and her sister and dealing with the mom and all. There were just times I wanted to get kind of back to the scary, or I felt like the character got a. It felt a little too convenient that basically during the day she could do what she wanted and kind of, you know what I mean? There was like an off switch for this thing. You know, I don't know. But anyway.
I just
generally. I loved it, but I loved it. It was
a great film. I know a lot of you guys have seen it.
Some really creepy effects at the end when they're at that point where they're just giving you the scary creature head on.
Here's a weird connection and kind of like parallel I noticed between, like I mentioned, these two bookend horror blockbusters of 2022, Barbarian and Smile.
Yeah.
Something I noticed that's very similar, almost had to have been kind of accidentally similar, is if you've watched Barbarian, spoiler alert, that kind of a inbred crazy character, the mother, that's sort of the antagonist of the movie. If you look at the design of the mother, and you look at the design from Barbarian, and you look at the design when the trauma demon takes the form of the character of Rose's mother in Smile, they sort of almost look identical. The character designs of the two antagonists look very, very similar to me. Now, a couple movies Smile really is got the DNA of. Somebody in the comment section brought up It Follows. Totally agree with that. Another couple of older films, not too much older, The Ring and The Grudge.
Sure, yeah.
Smile, to me, in its DNA, has a very J-horror sensibility. In a lot of J-horror, as we all know, concerns curses. And, well, that's Smile's bread and butter. So I think I would not be surprised if Parker Finn was inspired by a lot of 90s and early 2000s J-horror.
Right.
Because that's some of the scariest stuff ever. I'm trying to think of the movie. Vamp a little bit. I got to look up the title. There's a Japanese movie that's so damn scary.
But there was a song that I was playing at the beginning of the live stream today before we came on, and I used during the commercial I put up
Pulse.
yesterday.
That Japanese movie's called Pulse. Check that one out. Go.
And anyway, it was a song from the Laura Hasn't Slept short, and it's an old 50s. I love how many old songs deal with basically nightmares or things coming to you in your dreams and not going well. There's a lot of them. You stumbled upon through Nightmare on Elm Street, and then this movie, the short had its own. I think Smile even uses one during its credits.
Yeah. At the end, it has a very like Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Smile has I think it borrows it from Evil Dead 2, where it has this horrific, intense ending that then cuts to a very incongruous song.
Yep.
That's almost like a like a completely tonally dissimilar song, so it gives you
Yep.
this cognitive dissonance
Yep.
going into the end credits,
Yep.
just like Evil Dead 2. Anyway,
No, that was it. I loved it. If anyone was wondering where that song was coming from earlier,
Matthew
that's
Gren,
where I got
yes,
from
it is simply called Pulse. I think it's from 2006. It's Japanese horror, and I will be honest, and I'll admit it, I didn't see it until this year, even though it's always on everybody's horror top 10 list.
Yeah.
I finally got around to watching it, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying.
Do you still get? I mean, you watch so much horror. Do you still get scared? Does anything make you get goosebumps?
Yeah,
or,
I mean,
or literally feel weirded out?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I watch certain things and
Do you ever have to
certain
stop
movies
them
and-
or pause
No,
them?
I
or
never
anything
have to
like
do that,
No?
but I definitely get unsettled. And
Do you
sometimes
look
I have
away
to
for any sort of like effects, like the stabs or things?
No. That's violence. I love hardcore violence.
Yeah.
So that in depictions of it in movies,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
for real.
yeah.
But I will say I do have a ritual where if I watch something that does unsettle me, because sometimes it's not like scary movies that get me, it's unsettling ideas that get me. I'll have to watch something after it before I go to bed.
Sure, yeah.
Or I'll have to put on like YouTube for
Cleanse
25
the
minutes.
palate,
Yeah, right,
yeah.
and watch something lighter.
Yeah.
What was I saying right before the YouTube thing though? Because I was going to make another point.
I'm sorry, I totally distracted
Yeah,
you.
you're not listening to me anyway.
No. I was just
Too bad we
wondering
don't have
if
an
you're
instant
scared.
playback.
Oh boy.
But yeah, I do. So that's what I
So-
have to do is sort of just like watch something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something about unsettling kind of vibes that
I'm a little.
Skinamarink was a movie I had to kind of watch YouTube after. It's not the scariest movie I've ever seen, not by 100 miles, but it unsettled me. You
Right.
want to know a movie that nobody talks about that actually the ending scared me enough that I was like, I had to get up out of bed and go do something and not even watch. I was unnerved. And I had never seen this movie. I only watched it because I love Sasquatch stories and Bigfoot movies
Yeah.
and Bigfoot lore. So I watched the Bobcat Goldthwait movie he directed called Willow Creek. Now, Bobcat Goldthwait, the old 80s stand-up comedian, is now kind of like a film director. And he's also obsessed with Bigfoot. And so he made a Bigfoot movie, found footage movie called
Gotcha.
Willow Creek.
Gotcha.
The ending of that movie scared the shit out of me. And I had to like get up. And I was like, wow, Bobcat Goldthwait made this from Police Academy.
A movie that jumped into my head that I remember also really making me have trouble getting through because how scared I was the Babadook.
Oh, Babadook is so scary.
Babadook, duk, duk, duk.
That movie
Oh my
has some of the
God.
best sound design I've ever seen in a
Oh
movie.
man, that one got me. That one got me.
Oh my God, the
I remember
Babadook
that.
is like like a stone cold classic.
Yeah.
Stone cold classic. They even mentioned it. We were watching
I
the
know.
beginning of Scream
That's
5.
what reminded me of it when
Yeah.
when we heard it. I was like, oh yeah. So
somebody, Matthew Graham mentioned Lake Mungo. You want to know a sad truth, and you can slap me in the face. I haven't watched it yet, even though I know it's supposed to be amazing. Another found footage classic. Haven't watched it yet, but everybody loves it. I just watched a movie I liked, I didn't love, but I wanted to get into the franchise of Hell House LLC. There's 4 of those movies, and they're sort of found footagey. I watched the first one. I did like it, and I hear that they get kind of better. So I'm looking forward to continuing that franchise. But I wasn't scared by it, but I did like it now that I'm thinking of it. Yeah. What else?
move on. Scream.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay. So I'll let you start because I know this. You had well, the whole concept of here is you had your own pitch for an original
Well,
Scream
the way I would preface this
movie.
and what got me thinking about Scream 7
Yeah.
is really not the movies. It's the tumultuous behind-the-scenes goings-on
Right
in
now.
the development of Scream 7. Obviously, if you guys have been following any of like the entertainment news, I post a lot of it on the Instagram page, and it gets a lot of comments activity. But there's been a lot of controversy and issues in the development of Scream 7. First of all, Melissa Barrera, who of course was one of the stars of Scream 5, which I'm going to refer to it as Scream 2022, and Scream 6 as one of the Carpenter sisters,
Mm-hmm.
was fired from Scream 7 because of what was considered inflammatory tweets regarding the Israel and Palestine conflict going on right now in the world. So she was fired. And coincidentally, a couple of days after that happened, Jenna Ortega, who played Tara Carpenter in the last two Scream movies, decides to withdraw from Scream 7 as well for supposedly
Scheduling
conflicts.
Yeah.
I think that's just her wanting to stand with Melissa Barrera and not wanting to take the kind of political flack for it in her career, which, by all accounts, if I with the publicists and managers that Jenna Ortega must have right now, I would have told her the same thing. So I get it. Now, at that time, they had Christopher Landon lined up to direct. Christopher Landon, of course, had success making Happy Death Day in its sequel, as well as the Vince Vaughn movie Freaky, which is really good. All three of those movies. Freaky is one of those like movies like body swap movies, but a slasher film,
Okay. Yeah,
where
yeah.
the final girl and the murderer in the slasher switch bodies.
Gotcha.
Vince Vaughn's the slasher, Catherine Newton's the final girl, and they switch and have to exist in each other's bodies. It's actually really funny. It's very Blumhousey, but it's really good.
Gotcha.
And the original Happy Death Day is really, really good. I would say Happy Death Day 2, the mistake they made, I think it's still good, but it's a sci-fi movie, not a horror. The sequel to Happy Death Day is more sci-fi than horror, and I think that turned off fans. So it kind of bombed. But Christopher Landon, I thought, was a perfect choice for a Scream movie because he obviously has a really great hold over meta textual horror and horror comedy, which is really, your pocket for the Scream franchise,
Of
right?
course, the whole thing is meta. Really quick, I'm just going to pause you to go right
go
back because
ahead.
I want them to see that I saw it. Yeah, a couple people talking about fire in the sky, and yes, that
Oh my
is
God.
a scary ass movie.
That's a perfect example of a terrifying
a good
film.
alien abduction movie. Communion used to get me too. Certain
Terrifying.
scenes in that, but anyway, get back. I didn't want to throw you. I just wanted them to.
Mike
see that we saw
Hatfield,
it.
you've been throwing a lot of great
I know, good stuff, man.
A lot of great references for Mike Hatfield tonight.
it's fun, but
You might get the MVP
I think
award.
Midwest Villain Z also was on the fire. Yeah, fire in the
Matthew
sky.
Graham also killing it
Oh
tonight.
my God.
But yeah, now
So-
Joe, let's just jump in here for a minute
Yeah,
before
yeah.
we go any further.
Okay.
Joe and I we both have seen the Scream movies, but it's neither Joe nor I's favorite franchise, and I don't say that dismissively. It's just not either of our favorite
It really
franchise.
wasn't. But and kind of a lot of what I have to say right now about Scream is it has to do with you sort of saying you were going to do this and me realizing, oh my God, I know I saw the original when it came out. I think I saw Scream 2. And then after that, it gets really hazy, and I never really kept up. It just never seemed to grab me at the time, or they were coming out, or just didn't interest me.
Well, this is around the same era where you were walking out of Tombstone. So who knows?
No. It's 96, right? So now it's like 96, 97. It's the end of college. I think I was, there had so much going on in life that I saw Scream.
Right.
And everything. But it didn't seem to like wallop me in the head like a lot of maybe people slightly younger. I know
Right.
my wife, who's a little younger, she was like, "Oh, you're watching the Scream movies again," and she was like all over it. So I decided to just go back to the beginning, and I was like, I'm gonna watch like the first two, and then I'm gonna jump forward.
And that was in preparation for this
Yeah,
episode.
I said
Right.
I want to know what Christian's gonna be pitching. I kind of want to keep up, and I'm gonna watch like the first two, and then I might jump to the last two just to kind of get a little refresher. But then I put in the first one, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous to everybody. And I was like, it was just like so good I was like, I finally had the experience of seeing it and being like, whoa. Of course, we're also covering Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street stuff right now
On Haddonfield Radio,
So
right.
to also, I guess, have a little more background on who made this film and his career and what led up to that, it was kind of interesting, or made it maybe a little more interesting for me now, and I got so sucked in, and he did so many clever. I mean, it's Wes, and
And a lot of that is also Kevin Williamson.
well, right, of course, and he is famous for sort of the bait and switch. I feel like a lot,
Right.
right? And then I just loved it so much that I just watched Scream 2 and Scream 3, and I want to just go in order. So I admit I haven't seen the very last one. I think we started Scream 5 earlier. I have to
Right.
finish it. I'm trying to.
I've seen them all.
I don't want to jump around. I'm trying to just take them all in because
Right.
I'm really digging this ride of getting
Well, the
Scream back
Scream
into
movies,
my
if
head,
anything,
you know?
what they do so effectively, much like the Halloween franchise, much like the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, is they have this really cogent, developing mythology
Yeah.
that travels through the films
Yep.
and evolves and changes. Some of the branches of the Scream mythology work better than others.
Oh,
but,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
but
for
it's
sure.
a series that's always growing. But the interesting thing is the mythology for the Scream franchise is almost like growing on two levels. On the in-universe Scream level storytelling, but then and again on a metatextual level, and in not only in the references, but in the way that horror films are
Yeah.
looked at and analyzed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then within the Scream films, you have the in-universe stab movies.
Right. That's what's so clever about this whole thing is the way they are self-referencing themselves within the idea of self-referencing horror movies.
It's like the classic
It's
dream
a
within
meta
a dream.
It's a meta within
Just like a dream
meta.
within a dream
Yeah,
within a dream.
And they keep kind of building, expanding on the idea. It can get a little cheesy
But
at
yet
times. It can get a little
but at least in the first-
heavy-handed. But it's
But in the first three movies, it's amazing that the House of Cards never falls.
no. It feels
And it's a delicate balance,
Yeah.
building meta against meta against meta and going in through these layers.
yeah,
And yet, I would argue in at least the first three films, the House of Cards stands tall.
yeah.
I think the crumbling happens for me in the fourth movie. But I loved what they were doing with the fifth and the sixth. And part of really what I loved was the two actors and characters of Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega.
It seems like they're bringing it more into the modern horror movie
Yeah,
realm.
the
and-
recall
and-
era, the elevated horror
leaving
era.
a little bit of the heavy-handed, not comedy, but lightheartedness
Right.
a little bit. That it works so well in the early ones, mainly because of the they had these giant ensemble casts in every single one. They almost got bigger and bigger, more and more people. That
It
you
was like a
recognize.
who's who of young talent of the 90s
It was like who? Yeah, it was crazy.
and early 2000s.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Every time I put out a new movie, and every time there's another scene, there'd be more and more people. You're like, hey, oh my God, it's that guy, it's that guy, it's that girl. It's
And another interesting thing about the Scream franchise, when I list, as I've done on other episodes of Haddonfield Radio, like my favorite slasher or horror characters of all time, I purposefully leave Ghostface off the list. And the reason I do that is because I would make the obvious argument that Ghostface is not a character. Ghostface is a mantle or even just a costume.
an idea.
Exactly. Now, if I was given the opportunity to shepherd not just where Scream's going next, but kind of moving towards the end.
Yeah.
That's what. Now, I'm not going to give like a scene by scene pitch here. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just going to spitball out this idea I've had for Scream.
Like a treatment, a little quick treatment.
Just a basic idea. And here's what I would do.
Yeah.
What I would do with Scream 7 is I would make it the final Scream film. And here's the two things I would do. I would make it where Ghostface is now hunting the actors who have been in previous Scream films. The movie opens
Scream or
into-
stab films.
Scream. The movie takes place in our world.
Uh-huh.
It's in our world. So you're on another level of meta. So you're in the real world.
Yeah.
And Ghostface, the movie opens with the Drew Barrymore scene again, but it's actually 2024 Drew Barrymore.
Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Ghostface is hunting and killing former cast members of the Scream films in our world. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The other change that I would make going forward is I would want to do something, and I would want to make Ghostface a unified character going forward. Now, if this was the final Scream film, that's fine. But if they were going to build off this
Sure,
notion
sure.
going forward, I would want Ghostface to now become one person. And I know obviously Ghostface has been 2 people, 3 people, a family of people in other films. I get that. I'm suggesting that Ghostface could now be one individual, a character that is now Ghostface.
Right.
But that's just my general idea.
Yeah.
That's what I would want to do with Scream. And I've been thinking about this idea for a while, but I actually think it's the perfect time in pop culture to utilize that idea where, and I love the
And
the
then would you
hook.
bring in new people to have to try and take him down, or
So
is
it's
this,
like Nev Campbell is
or
Nev
do you-
Campbell.
yeah.
It's like
does
basically what
Nev
Wes
Campbell-
Craven did in New Nightmare.
right, yeah, right.
So it's an homage in a way to Wes Craven.
Yeah.
And to me, the real hook for me that gets me excited in my mind is the idea of your opening scene is Drew Barrymore again, but it's Drew Barrymore,
Yeah. Getting sliced,
Getting
and diced.
murdered.
Yeah. Well,
or maybe it
Sorry, Drew.
subverts, or maybe the scene subverts.
yeah.
Okay?
So,
It
but
could
but
very well
start,
subvert.
It gives you
I
that
don't-
start.
I
to-
haven't sat down
yeah,
and
yeah,
wrote
yeah,
out
yeah.
treatment or script.
Yeah.
This is just I'm just trying to pitch my general concept.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Did we really freeze?
No, I think that's just your.
I hope we
computer
just didn't
freezing.
freeze because you just
No.
missed my entire Scream
No,
7 pitch.
that was just your computer refreshing.
I don't know. What do you guys think? Anything interesting in that? Does that have any merit? What do you think?
I think it could be. I think
It's just really that Drew Barrymore opening scene idea that really gets me.
right.
That it's actually Drew Barrymore, and that you could bring back all these people from all the previous films.
Sure.
And it's also a way to redirect the franchise, so you don't have to worry about all this, controversy that's gone on. You don't have to try to continue any of the storylines from 5 or 6. You could let 1, 2, 3, and 4 be one timeline, like the Halloween franchise.
Sure.
5 and 6 is almost like a secondary timeline, and this would almost start a new Scream timeline.
Yeah.
Everybody says they hate my idea and they don't want to listen to Haddonfield Radio anymore.
No. I think it could be very cleverly done. If now, do you know? Are they? Is production sort of stopped
As
altogether?
far as I've read up until this point,
or are they
production is
just-
paused.
Yeah. They of course. they
Christopher
gotta
Landon, I don't
refocus.
know if I already said this in our
Yeah.
live stream, but he actually also has now departed Scream 7. After Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega left, and they were going to have to reimagine what Scream 7 was going to be, Christopher Landon obviously probably said, I can't stick around forever, and I've got
Yeah,
other projects
yeah,
to do.
of
I don't know if
course,
that's
yeah.
what he said, but that would be my guess.
Yeah.
Everybody always wants Matthew Lillard,
I know.
Stu Marker to return. And I do, and I think that would be great too. My only problem was because it's permeated, that notion of Stu Marker returns has permeated the pop culture so deeply now that I think if you incorporated it into an upcoming movie, it would feel anticlimactic.
Yeah. I mean, how
Unless
can
you
they
could
even
do
do
that
it, but-
in a meta-textual way that builds off the fact that everyone in the Scream fandom knows
Yeah,
of that
right,
concept.
Right.
See,
right.
that's what I'm trying to get at with Scream and as a franchise that's so special. Because you have this level of metatextuality, you almost have more room to play with the Play-Doh of the
Yeah,
narrative.
yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? And how you can incorporate ideas.
That end scene during of Scream when the two young guys, Matthew Lillard and Billy Loomis, there, they just start stabbing each other to so you have wounds.
Yeah, right.
And I mean that got me. I kept watching like, oh my god, like you know what I mean.
I can
Imagine
tell you
just-
from years of watching movies next to Joe, he doesn't like stabbing.
Oh.
Like if you stab some, he winces.
I do. I'm not.
I seek
I
out
love watching
horrifically
horror
violent
movies,
movie
but
and TV.
But it gets me. I like it. The faker it looks the better for me because I know it won't make me cringe that much. But I did. I love them. Watching the first one again, it is a little 90s, like heavy 90s. As sometimes you're like, oh my god.
John
But-
Michael Barnett asks a good question. In your mind, who would direct and write this movie? And you know what? I don't even want to spitball potential director ideas for who could take Scream forward or Scream that concept that I'm throwing out there just for fun forward. But I'm going to think about it and I'm going to pin it in the comments because I love spitballing possible director ideas for upcoming projects. There was an episode of Haddonfield Radio where I threw out some ideas who could take the Halloween franchise next.
Right.
And it's always fun to think about that.
And there's a lot of Halloween references in the first Scream. Like, I was blown away. Obviously, they're using Halloween as their example, the kids watching the movie, and you have Jamie Kennedy's character kind of explaining how horror movies work through the and then they actually are using like parts of the soundtrack from Halloween are matching up with looking through the house later when the killer's in there. And then Billy, I kept thinking Loomis. Billy Loomis is Loomis also. I don't know. There was so much talk. Even the phone call to Drew Barrymore in the beginning. You know, one of the quiz questions is who's the guy in the white mask. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. I wonder if Wes and John were friends ever, if they were, or at this point at all, or
I think all these guys knew each other.
Why Wes was
they all knew each other.
was
All those
giving
directors
Halloween
of the 80s
such
and
a,
90s,
but
all
they were
knew each
also
other.
kind of competitors. You know what I mean? I mean, at that point, you know.
Mike Hatfield's asking, have you guys watched Thanksgiving yet? We talked about it on the Happy Horror Days last live stream 3. But I will say, I've seen it. Have you seen it yet?
No. Well, you said it kind of stunk, right?
Well, everybody else loves it
Yeah.
and likes it and loves it. I'm in the minority, and I know that. I just wasn't crazy about it. I thought, it didn't feel enough like Eli Roth's personality, and I didn't find it ballsy enough. And the thing I love about Eli Roth's cinema, especially Hostel 2 is a perfect example, is he just used to go so balls to the wall, and he was so provocative in his imagery.
Yeah.
And he's not afraid to really make you squirm with the violence.
Mm-hmm.
And even Cabin Fever has elements of that. And I just didn't feel a lot of his like we were talking about John Woo earlier. Same thing. Thanksgiving, ironically, even though he's been developing Thanksgiving, Eli Roth, for 16 years, it didn't feel like it had a lot of his personality. In the opening Black Friday pre-credit sequence, podcasters had just overhyped it for me, and I expected it to be insanity, violent insanity, and I thought it was a little tame, actually. But I mean, I enjoyed watching it, and I love the I'm forgetting the name of the slasher from Thanksgiving, unfortunately, the Thanksgiving slasher character name. But I love the design, and I think it's great design. And I totally
the Pilgrim,
the
Joe
Pilgrim character.
Smith?
He has like a name, John something, from like that era of history. I enjoyed it. You know, you want an Eli Roth movie I really love that nobody else likes, that I love. It's actually one of my favorite of all his films, is the movie Knock Knock with Keanu Reeves. It's sort of like a Michael Haneke's Funny Games ripoff, or like it's almost like Eli Roth doing a cover song version of Michael Haneke's Funny Games. And it's about Keanu Reeves plays this well-to-do architect. His wife... He's got this beautiful life, beautiful house. The wife and the kids go away and leave him alone in the house. And during this violent rainstorm, these two gorgeous, young, like probably 18-year-old, 17-year-old girls show up at his door. Our car broke down. Can you let us in?
Yeah.
And once they get in the house, they won't leave, and they're complete sociopaths. And they're there to destroy his life.
Yeah.
What's
the name of it again?
It's called Knock Knock.
Knock Knock.
And it's really good. It's a really good movie, and it gets terrible reviews, but I loved it. And Keanu Reeves gives a very campy, over-the-top performance. Matthew Grimm, Brandon Cronenberg should direct Scream 7 and burn everyone out. Well, it's one
That's
choice.
one way you can go with
It's a choice. I'll give you that.
Exorcist
John
trilogy.
Carver was the name.
John Carver, yes.
Thank you, Midwest Villain Z.
Our thoughts on the Exorcist trilogy. Now that is it official that David Gordon Green has departed, huh?
Well, I would say all of us in the horror community are a bunch of assholes and bullies for literally bullying David Gordon Green out of the Exorcist franchise. And what was sick about it was the snowballing of negativity that came towards Exorcist Believer before anyone actually saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, I really just I don't see it.
For some reason,
it's that bad at all.
People just didn't want that movie to exist. I think it has something to do with the beloved nature of the original Exorcist.
Sure.
But I think what it really has to do with was the political hatred against David Gordon Green because of Halloween Ends.
Yeah.
That's just my theory.
I don't know. I dug
It's
it.
not a terrible movie. You want a terrible exorcism movie from last year? Watch The Pope's Exorcist.
Yeah.
That movie sucked balls. Exorcist Believer was at least watchable. Pope's Exorcist in Russell Crowe, it's the worst Russell Crowe performance ever, and I love Russell Crowe, and it's his worst performance. And that includes that horrible COVID era movie where he's like a road rage guy, and he's road raging some woman. No, this is hammy terrible. Exorcist Believer was, if it had a damning criticism, it's just not great.
Yeah.
And maybe that is a horrible thing when you're building off the Exorcist legacy.
As we get closer to finishing up, I'm just going to throw up here the information. If anybody who didn't win a swag pack last time wants to enter,
why don't you let them know what's in the pack?
Yes, what we send you is a T-shirt and some posters and our sticker pack that we have from the show. So you get 3 posters, T-shirt, and a bunch of stickers that we have from our show. And just put in the hashtag swag pack there, and at the end of the week I'm going to be drawing 5 winners, or the only 5 people that may enter. Who knows?
I'm going to show you the swag pack.
We got some good
you can never see it there.
You always try to do the phone thing.
See it? You get the T-shirt, the posters, you get coasters, you get stickers. That's a swag pack.
Yeah.
Swaggy G, did he get a swag pack?
I think he was on the list.
Oh,
yes,
John
he sent us
Gagliano.
the thank you note.
How
Yes,
perfect.
he did.
Swaggy G
Of
gets
course.
a swag pack.
And, I think that for everybody else, very soon, maybe the next actual episode of Haddonfield Radio, we will have links where you can just buy some shirts and stuff if you guys want it. But
I'm actually wearing one right now.
There you go. Oh, boy, here it comes. Look at it.
Hold on.
Yep, there you go.
I'm the douchebag wearing his own show's shirt. I'm that guy. I just want to throw a couple quick ones. Just one sentence review, not reviews, but recommendations.
Yeah.
If you guys, I try to wear a different hoodie that represents something I love on every live stream. Let me move this mic one more time.
Mm-hmm.
Before I move it, I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah.
I got the hoodie from the merchandise of one of my favorite YouTubers out there. These 2 guys, Parker and Chester, their YouTube channel is called Life of Luxury. They have another one called Luxury Dark, and they make these really bizarre horror short films for YouTube that I love. Now, I do see reaction videos on YouTube of people completely mocking them. But I've watched every one of hundreds of their videos over the years, and I love their horror shorts. And I think they bring this bizarre kind of comedy to it and kind of tongue-in-cheekness to it. But they also have real good scares, and they're called Life of Luxury on YouTube. If you guys don't know it, you should check it out. I'm wearing one of their hoodies today.
Look at that. That's cool.
One of my favorite YouTubers, when they get it's one of those YouTubers when I see it in my subscriptions, a new video, like I need to change my diaper. Very excited. And I also have a comic. I said I would mention a comic book.
Okay, yeah.
I actually have a comic series that if you guys love horror comics or horror adjacent comics, you would love this series I'm about to mention. One of my favorite contemporary comic book writers, James Tynion IV, wrote it. It's very popular. A lot of people would probably know it. It's called Something is Killing the Children, or Sick Tick, as the kids call it. This is so worth seeking out if you love horror comics. And if you just love comics in general, like I've loved comics my whole life, I still go and buy comic books. This is a series I think it would fit in with, if you like the type of content we do here on Haddonfield Radio, you'd love this series. So I just wanted to bring it up because it's been going for a while now. It's not new. And there's even a couple spin-off titles from it. It's really good with a really great lead character, Erica Slaughter. It's a great series, and I think you'll really like it if you like the stuff we talk about.
Cool.
Done.
Oh.
What else?
Is it a one issue? Is there more?
Oh, no. It's gone on for volumes and
okay,
volumes
gotcha,
and volumes.
gotcha.
And different storylines and spin-offs. Let's see. A couple last ones we've got here. Sandy Peterson would like a swag pack.
Oh, she's
definitely
getting one.
getting
She's
one.
getting
no
one.
doubt. Let's see. Matt Hatfield mentioned the movie Suitable Flesh, I believe was directed by Joe Lynch. Brand new movie. It's in that Stuart Gordon H.P. Lovecraft vein of like, from what I've heard, I haven't watched it yet, of like Reanimator and From Beyond. I noticed From Beyond is one of those weird movies, Stuart Gordon movie From Beyond, also with a great Ken Faree performance. And one of those Jeffrey Combs and Stuart Gordon movies. For a long time, you could not find From Beyond streaming. I have it on a DVD, but you couldn't find it just if you want to throw it on at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, now it's on Amazon Prime, so if you want to catch up with that one again, that's a classic. I love that movie, From Beyond. I prefer it to Reanimator. I also prefer Bride of Reanimator to Reanimator, but I love From Beyond, my favorite Stuart Gordon film of all time. There's another Stuart Gordon film I'll throw out there real quick. I'm trying to think of the title. If you guys look for it, it's based on a true story of a woman who was driving home drunk and she hit a homeless man head on. The homeless man got stuck halfway through the windshield, and she just went and parked in her garage and left him there to spend days and days and days dying.
Okay.
Stuck in the windshield of her car. Okay, halfway in, halfway out. After being hit by her car, she just left him there to avoid consequences, waiting for him to die so she could get rid of the body. This is actually a true story.
Wow.
And Stuart Gordon within the last 10 years, he made a movie about it. Let me look up the
It
title.
reminds me of somebody else was mentioning earlier for scary movies, the movie Signs.
Oh my God, the Joaquin Phoenix closet scene,
Oh,
iconic.
But it reminds me of. Do you remember? There's a scene where his wife is pinned by the car against a tree.
That's in Signs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and it reminds me of sort of that sort of thing with somebody.
And
getting,
that
you know,
scene from Signs has that trope that I love: the idea that the person's been hit by the subway car, their body is spun all
Right.
the way around.
And as soon as
They'll
you
be
relieve the
alive
pressure,
until we
yeah.
relieve the pressure, and then
Yeah.
they die. That's a
Yeah.
creepy idea.
Yeah, that was awful, but that was also, I agree, scary movie at times. You know, some of the best alien movies out there are really just scary, really, really scary. You know what I mean?
Simply enough, that Stuart Gordon with the homeless guy in the windshield movie was actually called Stuck.
Say with those
Great
in your
title.
windshield.
Perfect marketing
Yeah,
for that
yeah,
movie.
Stuck.
No, it's really a odd, tongue-in-cheek, strange, has a strange tone like a lot of Stuart Gordon films because he's very subversive as a director, as we all know. And definitely worth watching. If anything, I hope between the Instagram page and these live streams that you guys maybe get some interesting movies to watch. And I love picking up on the ones that I know Joe does too, that you guys mention.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're getting close to wrapping it up here.
I did promise at the beginning I would show everyone my forehead.
Let's see it. I'm not as brave.
Listen, my whole life I've had a beautiful head of hair.
You
You
did.
should see some of my old
But
pictures.
you're acting like you're bald or
No,
something.
but listen to me. The last year I started having a receding hairline, and it's going quick. Real quick. Look at this thing. I don't have a forehead. I have a 5-head.
Oh my God!
Look,
How do you live with yourself?
It takes me 20 minutes to get my hat all the way up the ravine.
Well, maybe if you didn't shave it so short.
All I
let
have
it
to say is
grow a
3
little.
words. Your ad here. We don't need a Patreon. You can take out ad
man.
space during our live streams on my frickin' forehead. I swear my hair used to be here. Look at it.
I'm sorry, Christian's picking this moment to have a
Right now,
midlife-
literally, I've blinded someone with the
crisis.
light going off my forehead. Somebody literally has got, macular degeneration now.
Well, I think we've officially run out of things to talk about here.
I really love all you guys.
No, thank
And
you,
I just
everyone.
want to say, the people who have taken time out of their
Yeah.
busy lives, like Default 0418, I love you. He's obviously balding too, and brother, I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
I
with
want to
you.
say we're still thinning.
You want to show your hair?
No, come on, let's not do that.
I was brave enough.
Yeah, but mine, it's all messy and
Just
that
show your
longer.
hair.
Oh my God.
Let's see his hair.
You're
We
really
all
doing
want to
this,
see it.
huh? See, look at the
No,
those
don't
flowing locks.
don't do the show the bald part so I don't feel
What
bad.
bald part? There's no bald part.
Yeah, no, there's no bald part.
No,
You're
it's
right.
thinning,
Don't worry about
thinning.
it. There's
It's
nothing.
Thinning.
Yep. There's no bald
Thinning.
part.
I know about reality. Don't mess with the fantasy.
I'm gonna tell you what. I'm getting older. I'm almost 2 hours from now. I'm gonna be 49. My last year of my 40s.
Since our last live stream, I've become a grandfather.
That's right,
You want to talk about feeling old?
Granddad. I'm over
try
here.
having a kid that's having a kid.
You want to try feeling old? I have to podcast with Pops over here. He's out. When I got here today, he was out on a rocking chair on the front porch. You boys need some gas. He's old. He's a grandfather. This is why I never had kids. I never had kids, one, so I can be forgotten when I'm old and die alone in an apartment and not found for 2 weeks, but also because I never wanted to get to the point where I had to have grandkids and be a grandfather.
No, it's awesome. It's
the
great.
first friend of mine to have grandkids. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Well, I started early, and you know,
he's not
I have
old.
a 25-year-old daughter.
He's
who's
actually
a
younger
kid.
than me, and he's a grandfather. What does that make me? And again, I want to mention again, and just to remind you, because I know I pick on Joe sometimes, but I also live in my parents' basement in a little tiny room with a 16-year-old Chihuahua and no girlfriend.
A lot of books.
That's why I have so
Lot of
much time for
books.
movie recommendations.
Hey, anyway, listen, we love everyone who.
Yeah, no, honestly, sincerely, we really, really love you. If
tuned
you've
in
taken
tonight.
time out of your busy lives to chill with us here in the basement, the Haddonfield Radio basement, we love you and appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
What's coming
Thank
up
you
next
guys.
on the channel?
So I think the next thing is going to be our next episode of the Trailer Park, where we cover, like we were talking about earlier, the trailers for Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection, and we have our very first Haddonfield Radio interview with Mr. Keith Voss, who helped put together those trailers.
And he talks at length about just his time in that era of movies having a front row seat to the development of a lot of iconic cinema.
It's a cool
It's
story.
There was points during that interview where I had to keep reminding myself we're interviewing someone because I was just enjoying listening to him.
I know. He just finished. I'd be like, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, I have to ask a question.
So yeah,
Yeah,
but
no.
that'll be coming up next on the episode 7 of Trailer Park. And then, of course, we'll be back after that at the end of this month. If you're a listener in the present, we'll be back at the end of the month with episode 17 of Haddonfield Radio, where we'll be covering, and I'm going to get it right this time, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master.
Oh, I was going to say Dream Warriors. Listen to
Oh,
me.
for fuck's sake.
I'm done. It's late.
Welcome to Haddonfield
Gramps has
Radio.
got to go take his nap.
That's the first time I dropped the F-bomb on
You
this
did it.
channel.
You did it.
Well, I did it. It's
anyway.
now we're now PG-13 officially.
Lots
So yeah,
of
we
stuff
love you
coming.
guys. We got a
Lots of
lot,
stuff
and
coming.
also we got the Spotify channel.
Yeah.
If you want to listen to audio-only podcasts of our existing 16 episodes, and I always say, if you're a listener in the future, go watch all this shit now. You can do whatever you want. You can watch episode 23 if you want. I'm jealous, but I will say we love you very much. You guys mean the world to us. Joe and I both really always look forward to, if anything, we look forward to these live streams because it reminds me and Joe of our old radio days doing talk radio where it was always live.
Yeah.
And the best part was interacting with people and talking about things with other people and knowing you guys are actually in the room and in the basement with us because every time we do a Haddonfield Radio episode we pre-record, we always picture you guys with us watching the movies. So it's nice that you're actually here.
Yes.
And for all the people tuning in after the live stream, if you've taken time out of your busy schedule in the future to watch this,
Just kept.
we love you.
I went on a total tangent thought in my head.
Yeah,
of
go
the
for it.
Distant future when mankind is rebuilding from a destroyed society and they resurrect some YouTube servers, and this is the only videos that they're gonna find playable is Haddonfield Radio.
Well, that's a sad thought. Let's just
That's
hope.
where my mind just went on that. Sorry.
When the final cockroach people have nothing better to do but watch old episodes of Haddonfield Radio in a nuclear burned out future, I will be glad to be dead.
It's going to create this whole new civilization where they're going to worship like Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers
Yep.
and you know
We'll be the gods of the post-apocalyptic wasteland.
statues resurrected to a. All right, we got to
Anyway,
go, guys.
we love you guys. We'll be
Thank
back
you.
soon with more
Bye-bye.
Haddonfield Radio and more live streams coming in the future. We love you guys. I'm Christian White.
I'm Joe Francazio.
And have a very happy